Welcome to Promised Rest. There is a strange promise hidden inside the old Victorian timetable that a person may leave London with a valise, a pocket watch, a handful of tickets, and enough nerve to follow the iron lines until England becomes France, France becomes the Alps loosen into Italy, and the sea carries the journey toward Egypt. For these first 7 days, you are not watching the route from a distance. You are inside it. You step into stations bright with gaslight, sit beside companions who worry over luggage and meals, taste coffee in railway cafés, hear porters call through steam, and feel the world grow wider one platform, one supper, one harbor at a time. If you enjoy these long, quiet journeys, a gentle like and subscription helps Promised Rest keep publishing new stories each week. It also lets this kind of slow historical travel find the people who like falling asleep inside another century. The clock is already moving. The first tickets are folded in your coat, and London is waiting outside with wet streets, cab wheels, and the beginning of day one. Chapter 1: The Valise and the London Morning. You step into the damp London morning with a valise in one hand and your coat fastened higher than usual at the throat. The street outside still carries the dull shine of recent rain, and the wheels of the early cabs pass through the thin puddles with a soft, steady sound. Somewhere beyond the roofs, where the city is already lifting itself into business, a church clock gives the hour with the unhurried confidence of a thing that has never missed a train. You pause only long enough to feel the weight of the valise settle against your fingers, then turn toward the waiting cab, because a journey that means to cross half the known map must still begin with one ordinary piece of luggage, one ordinary door, and one small decision not to go back inside. Your companions are already gathered near the curb, each carrying the morning in a different manner. The practical Englishman, Mr. Alden, has folded the timetable into quarters and placed it inside his breast pocket, where it rests like a document of state. Beside him, Monsieur Bellamy, whose French is native and whose English has the graceful patience of someone accustomed to translating the world for other people, is checking the address written on the luggage labels. The oldest among you, Captain Harcourt, retired from regular sea service but not from the habit of examining skies, stands with one gloved hand on his stick and looks toward the low clouds as if they are a kind of sailing instruction. No one speaks very much at first. Early departure has its own etiquette, and the first courtesy of the morning is not to ask too much of anyone before breakfast. The cabman takes the valise with a practiced motion, not rough but not tender either, and places it beside the other pieces already strapped behind the cab. There is a larger trunk for the steamer days ahead, a smaller leather case for shirts and collars, a hat box whose roundness makes it inconvenient everywhere, and a parcel wrapped in brown paper that Mr. Alden insists contains nothing essential while continuing to keep it within reach. The railway labels are still fresh, their corners stiff, their strings tied through little reinforced holes. London, Paris, Brindisi, Suez. The names sit on the luggage before you have reached any of them, and that is one of the quiet powers of 19th-century travel. Paper goes ahead of the body. A destination is written before it is earned. The cab begins to move through streets where shop shutters are being lifted, and delivery boys are already learning the day's weight in their shoulders. A woman in a dark shawl arranges oranges under an awning. A milk cart makes its slow way along the curb. The windows of a coffee room glow with the mild yellow of gas still burning against a reluctant morning. You pass clerks walking quickly with umbrellas held low, a newspaper boy calling out headlines in a voice too bright for the hour, and a policeman standing where two streets meet, his cape darkened by the wet air. London does not appear to notice your departure. It is too large for that. Yet the city seems to participate in it, because every cab, every omnibus, every porter with a rope over his shoulder appears to belong to the same great system of going somewhere. Breakfast waits near the station, in a room where travelers eat with one eye on the clock and another on the door. The table is laid with white cloth, heavy cups, silver that has lost its brightness from constant service, and plates that arrive without ceremony because the staff understands haste better than conversation. Tea comes first, dark and hot, followed by toast in a rack, butter curled into small pale ridges, marmalade, boiled eggs, cold ham, and a dish of kidneys that Captain Harcourt regards as a proper beginning to any journey involving the sea. Monsieur Bellamy asks for coffee and receives it with an expression of polite acceptance rather than delight. Mr. Alden eats steadily, consulting the timetable between mouthfuls as if the train might change its mind unless watched. Around you, other departures are taking shape. A family with two sleepy children is bound for the coast, their nurse cutting bread into manageable pieces while the father speaks to a waiter about luggage. A commercial traveler in a checked coat has spread papers beside his plate and is adding figures with a pencil worn nearly to the wood. Near the window, a young officer reads a letter while his tea cools untouched. These lives do not belong to your journey, and yet for this brief interval they share the same room, the same urns of hot water, the same impatience of boots beneath chairs. Railway travel has made companions out of strangers before they know one another's names. Mr. Alden unfolds the timetable again, smoothing it with two fingers. The first train south is marked clearly, and beneath it, in smaller print, the connecting services unfold like a promise made by an orderly mind. He traces the line from London toward the Channel, then across France, through Paris, onward toward the mountain route, Italy, Brindisi, and the steamer that will take you east. To read the path in that room, with marmalade on the plate and rain on the window, feels almost absurd. The names are too distant for the breakfast table, yet the paper insists that they are joined, that a person may move from one to another by obeying printed hours, by keeping tickets dry, by presenting oneself at the proper platform before the bell. Monsieur Bellamy leans closer and notes gently that printed hours are not always the same as lived hours. In France, he says, a meal may require more time than the railway allows, unless one knows when to order and when to stop speaking. Captain Harcourt adds that steamers are even less sentimental than trains, because a ship may wait for cargo, but rarely for a passenger who has misplaced a glove. Mr. Alden hears both comments and folds the timetable with renewed care. There is no anxiety in the gesture, only respect. The journey is still young enough for every practical detail to feel like part of its charm. When the meal is paid for, the coins pass from hand to saucer, and the waiter makes change with the small elegance of someone who has done the same calculation all his working life. Outside the breakfast room, the station draws everything toward itself. Cabs arrive in soft collisions of sound. Horses breathe in the damp air. Porters move through the crowd with barrows, and passengers stand in little islands of luggage while pretending not to watch the clock. The great roof holds the smoke and the voices together so that the whole place seems to murmur, hiss, and call at once. Steam hangs near the engines in low white folds, then thins upward into the ironwork. You enter with your companions and feel the journey become official. Until now, it has existed in conversation, in packed clothes, in the unusual breakfast, in the valise beside the door. Here, under the station roof, it passes into the hands of clerks, guards, porters, inspectors, and printed boards. Mr. Alden approaches the booking office with the solemnity of a man entering a bank. Monsieur Bellamy stands beside the luggage and keeps one eye on the labels. Captain Harcourt watches a porter lift the larger trunk and remarks that any man who can move luggage through a station crowd without complaint has learned more discipline than many officers. The first small difficulty arrives almost politely. One label has twisted under its string, and the porter, seeing only the wrong side of the card, sends the hat box toward a different pile meant for passengers taking another line. The mistake is caught not by alarm, but by attention. Monsieur Bellamy notices the round case drifting away on a barrow and calls to the porter in a tone that is firm without being sharp. The porter stops, glances at the label, turns it over, and grins as if the hat box itself has tried to escape England by an unauthorized route. Mr. Alden produces a penny, the porter touches his cap, and the incident becomes one of those early travel moments that feels larger than it is because every object still matters. The tickets are examined next. They are not a single magical pass across the world, but a folded arrangement of stages, coupons, names, stamped marks, and written permissions. The clerk behind the glass studies them with a face trained to reveal no surprise at any destination, however distant. London to the coast, crossing arranged, onward continental portions, later connections to be confirmed. He speaks a few words to another clerk, who consults a ledger thick enough to contain the movements of a small nation. There is scratching of pen, turning of pages, a stamp pressed down with a dull authority. The sound is modest, but it changes the morning. The journey has entered official ink. While Mr. Alden receives the documents, you stand near the luggage and watch the platform life arrange itself around the waiting train. A woman in morning dress speaks softly to a boy who is old enough to be embarrassed by tenderness and young enough to need it. Two students argue over a newspaper, their scarves loose and their bags badly packed. A clergyman settles himself near a pile of books tied with cord. Farther down, a cook from the refreshment rooms carries a tray of cups through a door marked for staff, and the smell of tea briefly returns, mixed now with coal smoke and damp wool. Everything is ordinary. That is what makes it memorable. The machinery of departure is made not of grand gestures, but of small, repeated acts done at the proper time. A guard walks along the platform calling destinations, his voice carrying through the roof's smoky air. Doors open and close, steps are lowered, passengers begin choosing compartments according to instincts that no timetable can explain. Some prefer empty spaces and hope to keep them. Others look for respectable company. A few, experienced enough to be practical, choose the carriage nearest the luggage van or the refreshment room. Captain Harcourt recommends a compartment not too near the engine, not too near the end, and not already occupied by anyone with a bird cage, a crying child, or a parcel likely to leak. This advice is delivered with such calm seriousness that even Monsieur Bellamy accepts it as maritime wisdom adapted to land. You climb into the carriage and place your smaller things where they may be reached. The upholstery is dark and slightly worn at the edges. Leather straps hang beside the windows. A framed notice offers rules about smoking, communication cords, and the rights of passengers in language so formal that even discomfort seems regulated. Outside, through the window, the platform moves in fragments. The porter adjusting luggage, the guard checking his watch, a woman raising a handkerchief, a boy running with a newspaper held above his head. Your valise is above you now, no longer in your hand. This small surrender feels like the first real departure because part of your life has been placed in the keeping of the real way. Mr. Alden sits opposite and removes the timetable once more, though by now everyone knows the first stage. Monsieur Bellamy takes out a small phrase book, smiles at its confident simplifications, and slips it away again. Captain Harcourt settles near the window with the composure of someone who has slept in worse places than a railway carriage and eaten in better ones than most ships could offer. For a moment, no one says anything. The station sounds fill the silence, and beyond them lies the soft pressure of all the miles not yet traveled. Then the whistle gives its long, low call. The carriage shifts, hesitates, and begins to move. The platform slides past slowly at first, so slowly that faces remain visible and individual gestures still seem attached to particular people. A porter walks beside the train for a few steps, then lets it go. The breakfast room, the booking office, the clock, the roof beams, the damp shine of London coats and hats all begin to draw backward. You are not far from the street where the morning started, not yet beyond the city, not yet beyond the ordinary reach of a cab or a message. But the line has been crossed. London is no longer a place around you. It is the first place behind you. As the train gathers its measured pace, the city loosens by degrees. Brick walls, warehouses, signal boxes, laundry yards, and rows of narrow houses pass the window in a long, uneven procession. Smoke lies low over the roofs. Children pause near fences to watch the carriages go by, and dogs nose along the edges of muddy lanes without concern for international schedules. Inside the compartment, the first ease of travel begins to settle. Mr. Alden folds the timetable at last. Monsieur Bellamy remarks that France will feel closer after the first cup of coffee on the other side. Captain Harcourt, looking toward the pale strip of sky ahead, says that the channel may be civil if the wind remains where it is. The sentence rests there, not quite a promise and not quite a warning. You look down at your gloves, at the faint mark left by the valise handle across your palm, and then out again as London continues to fall away in pieces. The rails carry you south, toward the coast, toward the night train's enclosed warmth, toward the first damp breath of the sea. Behind you are the wet streets and breakfast cups of the morning. Ahead, The lamps of the southbound carriage are waiting to be lit. Chapter 2: The Southbound Train. By the time the lamps are lit inside the carriage, the first confidence of departure has softened into the more private feeling of travel after dark. London has withdrawn behind a long succession of suburbs, yards, sidings, and nameless stations whose signs pass too quickly to be read with comfort. The windows, which earlier gave you brick walls and pale fields and wet fences, have become dark panes in which the compartment reflects itself. Mr. Alden's folded timetable on his knee, Monsieur Bellamy's gloved hands resting over the handle of his cane, Captain Harcourt's profile turned toward whatever can still be learned from the weather. Your own face appears faintly in the glass and vanishes whenever a signal lamp goes by, so that the night seems to take you in pieces, returning only what the railway lights decide to show. The carriage has become its own small room, narrow but sufficient, with the sort of intimacy that belongs to travel rather than friendship. The upholstery gives off a dry, slightly dusty smell when anyone shifts. The leather window straps hang in place, dark from years of hands. Above your head, the smaller bags rest in the netting, while the heavier pieces have gone forward into the van, entrusted to labels, porters, and the good faith of railway procedure. Every now and then, the wheels pass over a junction with a fuller sound, and the whole carriage trembles as if remembering the weight it carries. No one is alarmed. Railway passengers learn quickly that much of travel is allowing oneself to be moved by forces one cannot see. Mr. Alden consults his watch with the care of a man who respects time, even when time is behaving well. He compares it with the printed schedule, then with the small station clock glimpsed through the window during a halt. The difference is only a minute or two, yet it receives his full attention. Monsieur Bellamy watches him with a mild expression and says that the English have made punctuality into a kind of table manners, something everyone notices most when it is absent. Mr. Alden accepts the remark as praise, or chooses to, and folds the paper again. Captain Harcourt, who has seen ships lose half a day to fog and still arrive in dignity, remarks that a minute on land is a far more anxious creature than a minute at sea. At the next stop, the platform appears suddenly, bright with lamps and damp boards. A railway guard opens the door with practiced economy, asks for tickets, and brings with him a brief rush of cold air. His lantern hangs low from one hand, and its light moves across boots, coats, luggage straps, faces, and the printed slips that Mr. Alden produces almost before they are requested. The guard reads them with a downward tilt of the head, punches or marks what must be marked, and returns them without conversation beyond the necessary words. Yet even this small inspection has the feeling of ceremony. In the late-Victorian railway world, movement is not merely motion, it is permission, recorded, checked, and acknowledged under lamplight. A woman in the next compartment asks whether there will be time for tea at the junction, and the guard tells her there may be 6 minutes if the train keeps its present temper. The phrase makes Monsieur Bellamy smile because it gives the train a character of its own, as if iron and steam could be moody but not unreasonable. The platform bell rings once, a porter calls out the station name, and somewhere farther down a door shuts with a softened wooden clap. You hear the guard's whistle, then feel the train gather itself again. The platform slips backward, taking with it the woman's question, the lamp glow, the wet boards, and the small comfort of knowing exactly where you are. After that, supper is assembled from parcels and station purchases, rather than served in any formal manner. Mr. Alden unwraps sandwiches cut with admirable straightness, their paper slightly damp at the corners from the journey. Captain Harcourt produces a small meat pie bought before departure, dense and peppered, wrapped in a napkin as though it were an item of navigation equipment. Monsieur Bellamy contributes apples, a piece of cheese, and a narrow packet of biscuits that he claims were chosen because they could survive both English railways and French criticism. The food is plain, but in the carriage it becomes companionable. You eat with your gloves set beside you, your knees arranged carefully, and your cup of tea balanced with the concentration required by a moving train. There is a particular pleasure in food eaten on the way to somewhere else. It is never only food. The sandwich tastes faintly of paper and railway smoke. The apple carries a cool brightness that seems borrowed from an orchard already far behind. The pie, with its heavy crust and peppered filling, belongs to the English evening you are leaving, and perhaps for that reason seems more English than it did when bought. Captain Harcourt eats slowly, then wipes the blade of his pocket knife with the corner of the napkin and folds it away. Mr. Alden refuses a second biscuit because he says there will be proper arrangements at the coast. Monsieur Bellamy observes that many journeys have been weakened by faith in proper arrangements. The remark proves almost prophetic at the next larger station, where the refreshment room is open but crowded, and the train's halt is shorter than anyone would like. You step down with your companions into air that smells of wet stone, coal smoke, tea, and warm milk. Inside the refreshment room, a woman behind the counter pours from a large urn with astonishing speed, while a boy in an apron gathers cups with less success but equal determination. There are buns under glass, slices of cold beef, small pies, bottled beer, and sandwiches whose edges have begun to curl under the lamps. Travelers speak quickly here, not because they are merry, but because the bell may ring before the sugar has dissolved. Mr. Alden secures tea. Captain Harcourt secures 2 additional pies and a bottle of ginger beer, explaining that night travel rewards foresight. Monsieur Bellamy buys a packet of chocolate wrapped in silver paper, an indulgence he presents as medical prudence against fatigue. You take a cup whose handle is warm and whose saucer has been chipped at the rim, and for a minute the journey pauses around the counter. The refreshment woman calls every man sir with the same practical tone, whether he is a gentleman, a clerk, or a farmer with mud at his hem. Her world is measured in trains, urns, coins, and cups returned too late. It is a small empire of 6-minute meals. Then the bell sounds. The cup is set down with tea still in it. Captain Harcourt gathers the purchases, and Mr. Alden turns at once toward the platform. There is no panic, only the swift obedience that railways teach. Men who had seemed settled a moment earlier are suddenly moving. Women collect children, parcels, and gloves. A porter threads through the crowd with a trunk balanced on his shoulder. The boy in the apron calls after someone who has left without taking change. You climb back into the carriage with the taste of hot tea still unfinished in your mouth. The train moves almost immediately, and the refreshment room is gone. reduced to a bright rectangle sliding away in the wet dark. For a while, conversation falls into the quieter register that follows food. The compartment warms. The lamps steady themselves. Outside, the country opens in broad darkness, broken by occasional farm lights, signal posts, and the pale flash of water in ditches beside the line. Mr. Alden places the newly bought provisions in the corner as if establishing a pantry. Monsieur Bellamy unwraps one square of chocolate and passes the rest around, allowing that English refreshment rooms may be forgiven if they lead to French habits by contrast. Captain Harcourt accepts the chocolate, studies it briefly, and says that at sea any food not spoiled by damp or cookery deserves gratitude. The older traveler begins, without announcing a story, to speak of ports. He tells you that the coast at night is never quite asleep, even when the town behind it seems shuttered and silent. There are men who know cargo by weight in the dark, men who can hear a change in the wind before a passenger notices the air, and clerks who write names into ledgers with hands stiff from cold. Steam, he says, has made people believe the sea has become more obedient, but every crossing still belongs partly to weather. He does not say this to trouble anyone. His tone is too mild for warning. It is simply one of those facts that comes naturally from a man who has spent much of his life measuring human plans against water. Monsieur Bellamy listens with interest, then asks whether the channel is truly as disagreeable as travelers claim. Captain Harcourt considers this with judicial care. The channel, he says, is not large enough to be majestic and not small enough to be ignored, which gives it a temperament noticed by everyone who crosses it. Mr. Alden, from behind the safety of the timetable, says that the packet service is regular. The captain agrees. Regularity, he adds, is one of civilization's finest words, though not always one of nature's. The sentence settles the matter without deciding it. Stations continue to appear and disappear through the night. At some, no one enters your carriage, and the halt is so brief it feels like a breath held and released. At others, a passenger opens the door, looks in, judges the compartment too full or too settled, and withdraws with an apology. Once, a commercial traveler joins you for several miles, bringing with him a leather sample case, a smell of rain, and a polite willingness to discuss railway connections with anyone awake enough to respond. He is bound for a town near the coast and has opinions on hotel breakfasts, most of them severe. When he leaves, he lifts his hat to everyone, forgets his newspaper, returns for it, and disappears into the platform smoke with the quick embarrassment of a man who prides himself on efficiency. These brief presences give the journey a layered feeling. You are traveling with your companions, but also with a moving population of clerks, families, officers, salesmen, porters, guards, women with carefully tied parcels, and children asleep against sleeves. Each has a reason for being carried south through the damp English dark. Some journeys will end before dawn. Some will reach the coast. A few, like yours, will continue beyond the water, beyond French stations and Alpine tunnels and Italian ports, into names that still feel unreal when spoken inside a railway carriage. The train gathers all these intentions without explaining any of them. Near midnight, the air in the compartment changes. It is not yet the sea, but it is the approach to it, a cooler dampness, a faint mineral edge, the sense that the land has begun narrowing toward an ending. Captain Harcourt notices first and shifts slightly toward the window. Mr. Alden consults the timetable again, this time less for the hour than for reassurance that the coast is arriving where the paper said it would. Monsieur Bellamy has grown quieter, as people often do when a border of any kind approaches. You feel it too. The first stage of the journey, which seemed so large when London lay ahead of it, is almost complete. At the coastal junction, the train slows through yards crowded with dark shapes. Trucks stand on sidings. Lamps burn near signal boxes. Farther off, there are warehouses, cranes, and the faint suggestion of masts or funnels beyond the station buildings. The platform is busier than the hour would allow in an inland town. Men in thick coats move luggage toward the boat train arrangements. Porters call names of destinations. Officials stand near doors with lists, papers, and the expression of those who know that tired travelers misunderstand instructions easily. The sound of gulls comes once through the roofed space, thin and misplaced in the night. Your luggage must be seen again. That is the first fact of the coast. The valise remains with you, but the larger trunk, the hat box, the brown paper parcel, and Captain Harcourt's weathered sea bag are located among other pieces under the care of a porter with a red scarf and a pencil tucked behind one ear. He reads the labels, turns one over, and asks whether the party is for the morning crossing or the night packet. Mr. Alden answers with the confidence of a man who has rehearsed the phrase. The porter nods, marks something on a card, and lifts the trunk as if it weighs less than it has any right to weigh. His red scarf is the easiest thing to follow through the crowd. There is a mild confusion over one of the smaller cases. A clerk believes it has been entered on the list with the wrong initial, and for several minutes the object sits on a wooden scale while its identity is discussed in low official tones. The case itself appears indifferent. Mr. Alden grows still rather than agitated, which is his manner of worry. Monsieur Bellamy offers a translation of the label that no one needs but everyone appreciates. Captain Harcourt, after watching the clerk examine the handwriting, says that luggage has always preferred mystery to obedience. At last the initial is corrected, the case is chalked, and the clerk's pen restores order to the world. This small delay leaves time for a late cup of tea in another refreshment room, smaller than the last and nearer the sea. The tea is stronger, the milk thinner, and the bread served with a slice of cold meat that tastes faintly of salt even before the crossing begins. A few passengers sit with collars turned up, eating in the subdued manner of people who expect discomfort and do not wish to discuss it. There are oranges in a bowl near the counter, their color bright under the lamps, and Monsieur Bellamy buys several because, he says, fruit is a more reliable companion than optimism. You take one and hold it in your hand for a moment, feeling its cool skin, its small stored sunlight, before placing it in your coat pocket for later. Beyond the refreshment room, the port waits in fragments, a dark platform, a line of lamps, a covered passage, the shadow of a vessel not yet fully visible, and men moving with ropes over their shoulders. The sea itself is mostly sound and breath at first. It presses its dampness into the air, lifts the smell of tar and coal and tide, and alters the voices around you. people speak more briefly near ships. Even those who are not afraid of water become practical in its presence. Captain Harcourt seems almost younger here, not in face but in attention. He looks toward the unseen packet and names, softly, the kind of night it may be. You do not board yet. That belongs to the next stage. For now you stand with your companions beneath the station lamps, while the southbound train rests behind you, its work nearly done. The carriage that carried you out of London has become only one part of the journey's first day, already joining the breakfast room, the cab, the porters, and the wet morning streets in the store of things left behind. Ahead, the channel waits with its dark water and its practical little steamer. The first night has brought you to the edge of England, and the next morning will begin with the crossing. Chapter 3: The Channel Crossing. The morning begins at the edge of England, not with sunrise in any grand sense, but with a gray light gathering slowly over the port buildings and making the wet stones visible one by one. You have slept little, or slept in pieces, the way travelers do when a train, a platform, and a waiting vessel divide the night into sections too brief for real rest. Around you, the port is already awake in its working clothes. Men move between luggage carts and covered passages. Officials stand near tables with papers under their hands. Passengers button coats, search pockets, gather children, and look toward the water with expressions that range from eagerness to resignation. The southbound train has delivered its people, and now the sea must take them. The packet steamer waits beyond the lamps, low, dark, and practical, with smoke lifting from her funnel into the pale morning air. She is not a great ocean liner with music, promenades, and polished ceremony. She is a working channel boat, built for repetition, for weather, for short crossings made by merchants, tourists, officials, emigrants, servants, officers, families, and people like yourself, who have no desire to remain between countries longer than necessary. Her gangway is damp. Her ropes are dark with water. Near the luggage area, porters arrange trunks and boxes in a manner that looks hurried until one notices how rarely they hesitate. Captain Harcourt watches the loading with approval, which from him is nearly praise. Your larger trunk appears among a dozen others, chalked and labeled, then disappears again into the practiced confusion of maritime handling. The hat box, after its earlier attempt at independence in London, is now kept close under Monsieur Bellamy's supervision. Mr. Alden holds the packet tickets between two fingers inside his glove, protecting them from the damp as though salt air might learn to read and object. The practical details multiply at the water's edge. Tickets must be shown again. Luggage must be declared or at least acknowledged. A clerk with a narrow face asks questions in a tone that suggests every answer has been given before by someone equally tired. A breakfast of sorts is taken before boarding, though it feels less like a meal than a preparation. There is tea in thick cups, bread with butter, a boiled egg whose shell resists more than it should, and a slice of cold beef that Captain Harcourt recommends on the grounds that an empty stomach and a small steamer are poor acquaintances. Monsieur Bellamy drinks coffee and looks at the vessel through the window, not nervously, but with the thoughtful respect of a man who prefers land to remain underfoot. Mr. Alden eats toast while studying the sailing time, although the steamer itself is visible enough to make the printed hour almost unnecessary. You take a little bread, a little tea, and keep the orange bought the night before in your coat pocket, where its cool roundness feels oddly reassuring. By the time you step onto the gangway, the port has gathered into movement. Boots sound on wet boards. A child complains in a low, exhausted voice and is answered by a nurse who has no softness left except endurance. A gentleman with a wrapped rug under one arm asks whether the sea is expected to be difficult and receives 3 different answers from 3 different strangers, none of them comforting because none of them agree. The steamer's crew move through these anxieties without adopting them. Their work belongs to ropes, rails, cargo, steam pressure, passenger counts, and the handling of the vessel. The private hopes of passengers are not ignored, but they are not allowed to govern anything. On deck, the air changes at once. It is colder than the platform air and cleaner in one direction, dirtier in another, depending on whether the wind brings sea damp or coal smoke. Gulls move over the harbor with thin, practical cries. The water beside the steamer lifts and folds against the hull, dark at first, then briefly silver where the morning catches it. You stand near the rail with your companions, each of you arranged against the crossing according to temperament. Captain Harcourt looks almost content. Mr. Alden checks the position of the saloon entrance, the luggage area, and the visible crew, mapping the ship as if it were a railway station that happened to move. Monsieur Bellamy adjusts his scarf and says, with calm honesty, that he intends to admire the sea mainly from a seated position. The departure itself is less dramatic than expected. Ropes are handled, orders are given, the gangway is drawn away, and the vessel eases from the harbor with a gradualness that allows the land to pretend it has not been left. The station roof, the wet platform, the lamps, the train that brought you down from London, all remain visible for several minutes, then begin to draw together into a single shore. A woman near you waves a handkerchief towards someone on the quay, though it is difficult to tell whether the intended person can still distinguish her from the other passengers. The steamer turns, the harbor wall passes, and the channel opens ahead in a spread of gray water. For the first hour, the crossing is mostly adjustment. The body learns the vessel in small corrections, a hand touching the rail, a foot placed wider than usual, a pause before turning. Some passengers remain on deck with brave expressions and tightly held coats. Others go below almost immediately, preferring benches, lamps, and the enclosed society of the saloon. You stay outside at first. The air is cold enough to make your eyes water, but there is pleasure in being able to watch England become a low, receding line. Captain Harcourt names a light, a headland, and a change in the surface of the water with the soft precision of long acquaintance. He does not lecture. He identifies the world as it passes. A steward comes by with a tray and asks whether anyone would care for tea, broth, or biscuits. The offer is plain, but on a Channel steamer it has the dignity of mercy. Mr. Alden accepts tea. Monsieur Bellamy chooses broth after a moment's consideration, holding the cup carefully with both hands as if warmth and balance have become related virtues. You take a biscuit and, later, the orange from your pocket. Its peel comes away in uneven pieces, releasing a bright scent that does not belong to coal smoke, wet rope, wool coats, or anxious stomachs. Captain Harcourt smiles at it and says that citrus has comforted more travelers than philosophy. No one argues. Below deck, the saloon offers another kind of crossing. The benches are fixed, the tables narrow, the lamps steady enough to suggest confidence, even when the vessel does not fully share it. A few passengers sit in silence with closed eyes. A clergyman reads a small book without turning the page for a long time. Two commercial travelers discuss tariffs in voices made lower by the room's closeness. Near the far end, a French mother gives a child a piece of bread dipped in something sweet, and the child accepts it with the solemnity of someone negotiating peace. The smell here is mixed. Damp clothing, varnished wood, tea, coal, and the faint sourness that gathers when too many people are trying not to admit the sea exists. Monsieur Bellamy, seated now with his broth, becomes more conversational. He explains that once you land in France, the journey will change not merely in language, but in rhythm. The waiters will move differently, he says. The stations will present themselves differently. Even the bread will make English bread seem like a serious but unimaginative relative. Mr. Alden, who respects bread but distrusts exaggeration, says that the main concern is reaching the correct connection. Monsieur Bellamy agrees, then adds that the correct connection is much improved by a correct luncheon. Captain Harcourt, from the end of the bench, observes that on land people often pretend food is an interruption, while at sea they learn it is a structure holding the day together. The vessel continues across water that never becomes violent, though it never becomes still either. Every so often, a fuller roll passes through the saloon, and conversation pauses until cups settle and faces regain their chosen expressions. A young man near the door laughs too loudly after one such movement, then grows embarrassed by his own noise. An older woman, wrapped in a dark cloak, offers him a peppermint from a little tin. He accepts it with gratitude, and the exchange is so small that it might vanish from any formal record of travel. Yet it belongs to the crossing as surely as the route and the hour. Journeys are made of such mercies, most of them too brief to be named. When you return to the deck, the English coast has thinned into distance, and the French coast has not yet fully arrived. For a while there is only water, sky, smoke, and the vessel's steady labor. The deck crew attend to tasks whose names you do not know. A sailor coils a rope near the rail. Another checks something near a hatch. An officer looks outward with a glass and then speaks to a man beside him in a tone too low to carry. Your companions stand with you for several minutes without speaking. Even Mr. Alden leaves the timetable alone. There is no station clock here, no platform board, no printed sign offering the next town. The crossing has placed you in a small interval between systems. That interval does not last. Gradually, the far shore begins to gather itself into fact. At first, it is only a faint darkness where the water ends, then a suggestion of buildings, harbor works, masts, smoke, and a line of coast under the morning's low light. Passengers notice in waves. Someone points. A child asks whether it is France and receives an answer too emotional for so short a distance. Monsieur Bellamy stands with renewed ease, as if the land ahead has restored something personal to him. Mr. Alden checks the papers again, because arrival makes documents important. Captain Harcourt looks once behind, once ahead, and says that the channel has behaved better than it was obliged to behave. The approach to the French port is busier than the open water. Small vessels move near the harbor. Men stand ready along the quay. The steamer slows, turns, and comes alongside with the patient assistance of ropes, hands, and shouted instructions that fold English habits into French surroundings. The first sounds from shore are not dramatic, but they are different. Sharper vowels, quicker exchanges, a rhythm of work that belongs to another country. The gangway is placed. Passengers gather themselves too early, as passengers always do, and then must stand with bags in hand while the proper order of disembarkation takes its time. This waiting after the crossing feels almost comic. Everyone has crossed the sea only to be delayed by a plank and a procedure. Customs receives you with tables, clerks, chalk, and the mild suspicion that attends all luggage entering a country. Your trunk is opened enough to satisfy the law, and not enough to disturb its whole arrangement. A customs man lifts a folded shirt, glances at a book, pauses over Captain Harcourt's sea bag, and marks a piece of luggage with chalk. Monsieur Bellamy answers a question in French before Mr. Alden has fully understood it, and the official's face softens by half a degree. The hat box is inspected with more curiosity than necessity. Its contents prove respectable, and it is allowed to continue its international career. Outside the customs room, the station world begins again, but it is not the same world you left. The signs have changed. The porters call differently. The cafés advertise coffee that smells darker and bread that looks less apologetic than the slices of the English refreshment room. Coins must be considered before being given. Words must be chosen or entrusted to Monsieur Bellamy. A railway employee directs your party toward the connecting train, his gestures so clear that even without language they seem almost sufficient. Mr. Alden dislikes relying on gestures, but he follows them because they are attached to authority. There is time for a small meal before the onward train, and this first French table becomes one of the morning's quiet rewards. You sit in a station cafe where the floor is worn by thousands of hurried feet, and the mirrors behind the counter hold the room in smoky fragments. Coffee arrives in cups smaller than English teacups, but stronger in its intention. There is bread with a crisp crust, butter, a little pot of jam, and an omelette folded simply on a white plate. Monsieur Bellamy orders with the relieved courtesy of a man returned to his proper element. Mr. Alden tastes the coffee, pauses, and admits that it is efficient. Captain Harcourt spreads butter on the bread and says that any nation capable of such crust has understood at least one form of civilization. The food steadies the company after the crossing. Around you, porters come and go, travelers consult papers, and a waiter moves through the room carrying more cups than seems safe. A woman in a blue dress counts coins into her palm. Two railwaymen eat standing at the end of the counter, speaking between bites with the ease of men who know exactly how many minutes remain. The omelette is warm, the bread breaks with a soft crackle, and the coffee leaves a pleasant bitterness that makes the morning feel sharper at the edges. You realize that the journey has already begun to change your appetite. It is not only hunger now, it is curiosity. Soon the onward train is announced, and the meal must end before the pleasure of it is finished. That, too, is part of travel. Monsieur Bellamy pays. Mr. Alden confirms the platform. Captain Harcourt secures the oranges that remain, and you follow the others back into the moving grammar of railway procedure. The French train waits under its own roof, with its own compartments, notices, guards, and habits. The luggage is transferred again, the tickets are shown again, and the morning crossing settles behind you as something already completed, though the taste of coffee and salt air still remains. As the train begins to move inland, the port slides away, and France opens not as a monument or a map, but as low houses, wet fields, poplars, station gardens, and roads running briefly beside the line before turning elsewhere. The sea is behind you now. England is farther behind still. Ahead lies the long rail passage toward Paris, toward supper in a station dining room, toward the first evening in a country where bread, clocks, voices, and waiting all obey a slightly different order. You sit back as the carriage gathers speed, and the second day carries you away from the coast into the heart of France. Chapter 4: First Supper in France. By evening, France has begun to arrange itself around the rhythm of the railway. The morning's salt air has long since faded from your coat, replaced by the warmer smells of carriage upholstery, coal smoke, damp wool, and the faint paper and ink scent of tickets handled too many times in one day. Outside the window, the northern fields pass in long, muted bands, broken by villages with tiled roofs, pale church towers, poplar lines, and station gardens where flowers remain carefully tended beside tracks darkened by soot. The train has carried you far enough from the port that the channel already feels like a thing belonging to another hour, and yet not far enough for the body to forget its movement. You still feel, beneath the steadier motion of the carriage, a small memory of the deck. Monsieur Bellamy notices the change first, not in the landscape, but in the hunger of the compartment. He closes his book, looks toward Mr. Alden's folded timetable, and says that the next proper halt should be treated with respect. Mr. Alden asks what form that respect is expected to take. A meal, Monsieur Bellamy replies, with the seriousness of a man naming an institution rather than a pleasure. Captain Harcourt, who has said little for the last hour, opens one eye and observes that any halt long enough to feed passengers has already justified its existence. The remark settles the matter. Everyone has eaten since landing, but only in fragments. Coffee, bread, a little omelette, an orange divided with a pocket knife, a biscuit saved from the steamer. Travel hunger is different from ordinary hunger. It is sharpened by timetables and softened by fatigue. The station where supper waits is neither grand nor insignificant. It has enough importance to possess a dining room, enough traffic to keep the waiters alert, and enough distance from Paris to feel like part of the road rather than a city in itself. Lamps burn beneath the platform roof, and their light falls on posters, luggage barrows, uniformed railwaymen, and travelers descending with the stiff movements of people who have sat too long. A bell rings somewhere beyond the first platform. Steam drifts low near the engine, carrying with it the cold, dark breath of the journey. The guard gives the length of the halt in French, and Monsieur Bellamy translates at once, not dramatically, but with the calm authority of someone who knows the difference between enough time and nearly enough. You follow the others toward the refreshment room with the particular alertness that comes when food and departure share the same clock. The doorway is crowded, but the crowd moves with the instinct of travelers who understand the room's purpose. Inside, mirrors along the walls hold the lamps in doubled rows, and the tables are covered in white cloths that have already served many hurried meals. Waiters in dark waistcoats pass between chairs with bread baskets, soup plates, bottles, folded napkins, and the quick, contained patience of men accustomed to people who must eat and leave. The air is warmer than the platform. It carries butter, roasted meat, coffee, wine, tobacco from someone's coat, and the faint mineral smell of wet stone drying near the entrance. A table is found near the wall. Mr. Alden sits where he can see the clock, Monsieur Bellamy where he can speak easily to the waiter, Captain Harcourt where no one can jostle his chair, and you where the whole room appears in layered movement, passengers leaning over plates, porters visible through the doorway, a waiter opening wine with a practiced turn of the wrist, a child asleep against a folded shawl while her mother eats soup beside her. The menu is not studied for long. Monsieur Bellamy orders with a few brief questions, shaping the meal to the time allowed. Soup first, then an omelet, roast chicken if it can be brought without delay, bread, butter, cheese, fruit, and coffee if the bell is merciful. The soup arrives in deep plates, pale and steaming, with a smell of vegetables, broth, and something green that seems to belong more to a kitchen garden than a railway station. You take the first spoonful and feel the body receive it with quiet gratitude. It is not elaborate food, but it is food made for people who have been carried across water and land since morning. Bread is placed beside the plates in a long basket, the crust crisp enough to sound softly when broken. Butter follows, then a small dish of salt, then a bottle of red wine that Captain Harcourt regards with cautious respect. Mr. Alden drinks water first, then allows himself a little wine after Monsieur Bellamy assures him that the schedule will not be affected by moderation. Across the table, conversation begins to loosen. It does not become loud. The dining room does not invite loudness, despite its activity. Every table is too close to another, every passenger too aware of the bell. Monsieur Bellamy explains that French railway meals are a negotiation between appetite and discipline. One must order promptly, eat without dawdling, and yet not insult the food by behaving as if it were merely fuel. Mr. Alden says that English refreshment rooms have solved this difficulty by lowering expectations. Captain Harcourt remarks that both nations might learn from ships, where the meal bell commands all classes with equal seriousness. You listen, eat, and let the warmth of the soup undo the cold left from the channel. The omelet is brought folded and yellow, plain except for herbs scattered through it. It disappears almost too quickly from the plate, though the taste remains: egg, butter, a trace of parsley, and the pleasing softness of food cooked just before it is served. Then comes the chicken, not a grand roast with ceremony, but pieces arranged on a platter with their skin browned and their juices gathered beneath. There are potatoes, a little dish of carrots, more bread, and a cheese that Monsieur Bellamy introduces as if it deserves proper acquaintance before judgment. The cheese is stronger than Mr. Alden expects. He pauses, considers, and says with great fairness that it has character. Monsieur Bellamy accepts this as a victory for civilization. A waiter passes behind you carrying coffee, and the smell briefly overpowers everything else. It is darker and more direct than the tea-soaked mornings of England, and it seems to belong to a different understanding of alertness. Near the next table, two officers speak in low tones over a plate of cold meat. A woman in a traveling dress counts coins beneath the edge of her napkin. A clerk with ink on his cuff eats standing near the counter, reading a folded paper while lifting bread to his mouth. These details arrive and pass without asking to become important, yet they make the room feel complete. A country is often first understood through the way people eat while under pressure. The clock remains visible. Mr. Alden does not stare at it constantly, but he returns to it often enough that the clock might fairly claim membership in the party. The train's departure is still some minutes away, and those minutes widen and shrink according to the course of the meal. When the cheese is cleared, Monsieur Bellamy asks for coffee. The waiter looks toward the clock, then gives a small nod. This nod contains more reassurance than a sentence. Coffee may be attempted. The cups arrive quickly, small, white, and hot, the liquid dark enough to reflect the lamp above the table. You take it slowly at first, then less slowly when a movement near the platform door suggests that other passengers have begun preparing to leave. There is a miniature panic at the table beside yours when a gentleman cannot locate his gloves. He searches his chair, then his coat, then the floor, while his wife continues eating fruit with a serenity that suggests this has happened before. A waiter discovers the gloves beneath the gentleman's own folded newspaper. The wife thanks the waiter. The gentleman thanks no one but looks relieved enough to forgive the world. Captain Harcourt watches the incident and says that the most dangerous articles in travel are not trunks or tickets, but small respectable objects that can hide in plain sight. Mr. Alden touches his breast pocket, confirming the tickets, and then does the same for his watch. The bell rings before the coffee is fully finished. It does not sound harsh, but it changes the room instantly. Chairs move back. Napkins are dropped beside plates. Waiters begin calculating bills with remarkable speed. Monsieur Bellamy has already asked for yours, and the coins pass through his hand with the efficiency of long practice. Mr. Alden rises with the expression of a man who believes no train should be trusted merely because one has paid for supper. Captain Harcourt takes one last piece of bread and folds it in a napkin, an act that may be thrift, prudence, or private affection for good crust. You stand, still carrying the warmth of the meal, and follow the little current of travelers toward the platform. The platform air is cooler, and the steam from the waiting train mingles with the smell of supper that clings to coats and scarves. Porters call out, doors open, and guards move along the carriages with lanterns. For a moment, the world divides into those who have eaten and those who have only arrived in time to watch others return from the dining room. Your luggage is where it should be. The hat box remains obedient. The brown paper parcel has survived another transfer. Monsieur Bellamy exchanges a few words with a railway man who points toward your carriage. Mr. Alden verifies the compartment number. Captain Harcourt, chewing the last of the bread, says that France has improved since breakfast. Inside the carriage, the supper becomes part of the journey almost at once. The compartment smells faintly of coffee and bread brought in on everyone's clothing. The lamps are lit. The seats receive tired bodies with a familiarity they did not possess earlier. Outside, the dining room windows shine for a little while beside the platform, and through them you can still see the waiters clearing tables for the next wave of travelers. Plates are lifted, cloths shaken, bottles removed, cups gathered. The room that felt so briefly like yours is already being prepared for people whose names you will never know. As the train begins to move, Monsieur Bellamy unwraps a small paper packet and reveals 2 pairs bought from the counter while no one was looking. He offers them around with the quiet triumph of a man who has improved the future. Mr. Alden accepts half a pair and admits that continental travel has certain advantages when supervised properly. Captain Harcourt looks out at the platform sliding away and says that any journey with soup, bread, coffee, and a punctual departure is in better condition than most governments. The pear is sweet, slightly grainy, and cool after the heat of supper. You eat it slowly as the station lights begin to thin behind you. Night returns beyond the glass, but it is not the same night that carried you south through England. This one belongs to France, to fields under a different darkness, to villages whose names you cannot always pronounce, to telegraph wires running beside the line toward Paris and beyond. The train settles into speed. Wheels take up their repeating measure. Conversations in neighboring compartments soften, then fade, then return in fragments when the train slows at smaller stations. You lean back, neither fully awake nor ready to sleep, while the body begins to accept the pattern of the journey. Arrive, eat, show papers, board again, move on. The day has contained too many beginnings to feel like a single day. London's wet morning, the southbound night, the Channel air, the French port, the first coffee, and now this supper have layered themselves one over another until memory no longer arranges them neatly. They are held together by the tickets in Mr. Alden's pocket, by the luggage somewhere forward, by the companions across from you, and by the rails continuing under the dark. Ahead, Paris waits not as a destination for lingering, but as the next great exchange of stations, cabs, cafés, and decisions. The French supper recedes behind you, and the train carries its warmed, drowsy passengers onward through the night toward the city that will receive them in transit. Chapter 5. Paris in Transit. Paris receives you not as a city waiting to be admired, but as a great arrangement of arrivals, departures, clocks, cabs, luggage rooms, hotel counters, cafés, and streets that seem to begin before anyone has agreed where they are going. The train enters through the outer districts in the gray patience of early morning, past yards of freight wagons, signal posts, workmen's sheds, and rows of buildings whose windows catch the first light unevenly. You are tired enough for everything to appear both sharp and distant. The previous day's Channel crossing, the first French supper, the night carriage, and the repeated handling of tickets have left a faint heaviness behind the eyes, yet the name of the city gives even fatigue a different posture. Paris is not the end of this stage. It is the place where the journey must change its hands. The station roof gathers the morning into iron and glass. When the train stops, passengers rise in that small confusion peculiar to arrival. Coats pulled from hooks, parcels checked, children woken, newspapers folded, gloves searched for, bags lowered from the racks with more effort than seemed necessary when they were placed there. Mr. Alden is awake at once, or has never fully slept, and his first movement is toward the pocket where the tickets rest. Monsieur Bellamy smooths his coat, takes in the platform with something close to private recognition, and becomes more alert in the way a person does when language has turned homeward. Captain Harcourt unfolds himself slowly from the corner, studies the crowd, and remarks that a large station at dawn resembles a harbor without water. You step down onto the platform and feel the city's movement rise around you. Porters pass with barrows. Officials call directions. Railway men in uniform speak in quick exchanges that seem to decide matters before one has understood the question. The luggage must be found again, and because the luggage has now crossed a border, it seems to possess a biography of its own. The large trunk appears with a new chalk mark. The smaller leather case has gathered dust along one side. The hat box, still under Monsieur Bellamy's careful eye, emerges from a pile of valises and carpet bags, with an air of having survived an indignity. A porter with a trimmed beard and a blue blouse listens to your destination, glances at the labels, and repeats the name of the next station with a confidence that makes the transfer sound simple. It is not quite simple. Paris, for travelers passing through rather than staying, is often a matter of crossing from one railway world to another. The line that brings you in does not necessarily hand you gently to the line that will carry you onward, and so the city must be entered at least enough to be crossed. Mr. Alden dislikes this arrangement on principle because it allows too much city between one printed hour and the next. Monsieur Bellamy explains with tact that Paris has many stations because Paris has many directions, and a great capital does not bend itself entirely around the convenience of foreign travelers with anxious timetables. Captain Harcourt says that ships have one advantage in this respect. Once aboard, the passenger may stop discovering new platforms. A cab is found outside amid a press of wheels, horses, drivers, porters, and people giving instructions in several degrees of certainty. Your luggage is lifted and strapped. The cabman, after a short exchange with Monsieur Bellamy, nods as if the route is ordinary, although to you the name of the next station still feels like a small test. The morning air is cool, carrying damp stone, horse sweat, bread from a nearby bakery, and the faint smoke of thousands of fires beginning their work inside the city. You climb in with your companions, knees arranged around bags and coats, and the cab moves out from the station into Paris. The streets at first are practical rather than theatrical. Workers carry baskets. Shop shutters rise. A woman in a white cap sweeps water from a doorway. Carts loaded with vegetables move toward markets with a slow authority greater than that of private carriages, because food has its own right of way in a waking city. Then the avenues widen, and the city begins to show a different face. Long lines of buildings, balconies, clipped trees, newspaper kiosks, cafe awnings, and early pedestrians moving with a confidence that suggests they belong to the pavement more fully than any visitor can. You see no monument long enough to claim it. Paris reaches you through fragments: a gilt sign above a shop, a boy carrying loaves nearly as long as his arm, the dark mirror of a cafe window, the smell of coffee escaping through an open door. Monsieur Bellamy watches the streets with the quiet pleasure of recognition, though he does not sentimentalize them. He points out a boulevard, then a public building, then says no more because the cab's motion has made explanation unnecessary. Mr. Alden asks how long the crossing should take. The answer depends on traffic, which Mr. Alden receives as if it were a personal weakness in urban planning. Captain Harcourt looks out at the rows of cafés and observes that a city which breakfasts so publicly must have confidence in itself. You pass a baker's window where round loaves, long loaves, and small rolls are arranged in the warm light. After the compartment night, the sight of bread behind glass feels almost luxurious. The next station is reached with time enough for breakfast, though not enough for idleness. This distinction matters. Monsieur Bellamy leads the party into a café near the railway entrance, a place already half full with travelers, clerks, and men whose workday seems to begin with coffee, tobacco, and a newspaper folded to a precise column. The room is narrow, mirrored, and warm. Marble-topped tables stand close enough that private conversation becomes a matter of tone rather than distance. A waiter approaches with the speed of habit, listens to Monsieur Bellamy, and returns with coffee, hot milk, rolls, butter, and small dishes of jam. There is also chocolate for anyone who wants it, thick and dark, and Captain Harcourt accepts a cup after being assured it is not meant only for children. Breakfast in Paris is lighter than the English morning table, but it seems to ask more attention from the senses. The roll breaks with a dry, delicate sound and gives way to a soft interior. The butter is pale and cool. The coffee, taken with hot milk, steadies the mind without the heaviness of strong tea. Mr. Alden, who had expected to disapprove of something, finds the arrangement too efficient to criticize. Monsieur Bellamy spreads jam with the contentment of a man whose country has been properly represented by bread. Captain Harcourt dips a piece of roll into chocolate and says that if this is how the French prepare for work, it is remarkable they ever leave the table. Around you, Paris eats and reads. A clerk marks a newspaper with his thumbnail while lifting coffee to his mouth. Two women in dark dresses share a plate of rolls and speak in low voices under the room's bright mirror. A railway employee stands at the counter and drinks quickly, leaving behind a coin, a nod, and the smell of tobacco on his coat. Near the doorway, a young man with ink-stained fingers writes a note on a postcard while his breakfast cools untouched. This is not the Paris of long leisure. It is the Paris of people beginning the day inside a city that expects them to move. For a traveler in transit, that is the truer introduction. There is a brief discussion over whether a small purchase should be made before boarding the southbound train. Monsieur Bellamy recommends fruit, bread, and perhaps a little cheese, because a train journey improves when it contains its own reserve of civilization. Mr. Alden says the railway timetable shows a proper luncheon halt. Captain Harcourt says that timetables show many hopeful things. This decides the matter. A nearby shop provides pears, a paper packet of biscuits, a wedge of cheese wrapped carefully, and a small twist of salt. You also buy a little pastry glazed with fruit, more because it shines behind the glass than because hunger requires it. Travel teaches appetite to think ahead. The luggage, meanwhile, has been transferred to the appropriate care, or as appropriate as any luggage arrangement can seem before departure. You return to the station and find the porter, who has been engaged for the task, standing beside the heavier pieces with the serene expression of a man who has not worried because he has not needed to. Mr. Alden checks each label. London has already begun to look worn on the cards. Paris has been added by chalk and handling rather than by original intention. Farther names wait their turn in string and ink. There is something touching in the way luggage records a journey without understanding it. It receives marks, dust, knocks, and stamps in place of memory. Inside the station, the southbound train waits under a roof filled with echoing sound. Paris seems to pour people into it from every side. A family bound for Lyon stands near a pile of trunks wrapped in canvas. A priest reads from a small book while keeping one hand on a carpet bag. Two businessmen speak with great seriousness beside a crate of samples. A young woman in a traveling dress consults a letter, looks up at the platform sign, and then folds the letter into her glove as if it has served its purpose. The guard moves along the carriages, and his calls run through the platform with a briskness that belongs to the railway rather than the city. The compartment chosen for this stage is warmer, perhaps because the day has advanced, perhaps because the morning coffee still lingers in everyone's blood. You take your seat by the window. Mr. Alden places the official papers in an inner pocket and then checks that he has done so. Monsieur Bellamy arranges the provisions with quiet satisfaction. Captain Harcourt settles his stick between his knees and looks toward the platform, where a porter is arguing mildly with a passenger who wants a trunk placed somewhere it clearly cannot go. The argument ends without victory for the passenger, which seems to Captain Harcourt a reassuring sign of order. Before the train departs, a newspaper seller passes along the platform, calling papers in a voice that rises and falls like a practiced instrument. Monsieur Bellamy buys one and scans the columns, occasionally translating a headline for the group. Politics, markets, a theater notice, a small item about railway delays on another line, an advertisement for patent medicine, and an announcement of ships. The world appears in print as a series of things requiring attention, but inside the carriage each item seems softened by travel. Mr. Alden cares only for the railway notice, which does not concern your route. Captain Harcourt asks about the ships, then loses interest when none are yours. Departure from Paris is gradual. The train does not so much leave the city as pass through its many outer layers: platforms, sidings, workshops, warehouses, walls, back streets, bridges, and districts where laundry hangs in pale lines above courtyards. Then come factories, then smaller houses, then fields cut by roads and rivers, then stations with names that Monsieur Bellamy pronounces, and Mr. Alden repeats under his breath with less success than dignity. Paris remains behind not as a single view, but as a series of impressions gathered too quickly. Coffee, bread, mirrors, cab wheels, station smoke, the lift of voices, the swift authority of waiters, the feeling of being briefly inside a city that would continue perfectly well without you. By midday, the southward rhythm has taken hold. The train runs through country that seems gentler than the timetable suggests, because paper compresses what the window restores. Villages appear around church towers. Rivers flash under bridges. Vineyards begin to show themselves in ordered rows where the land allows. At stations, vendors and porters come near the carriages, and sometimes a basket is lifted, a question asked, a purchase made through the window with coins counted in haste. The pears bought in Paris are cut and shared. The cheese is opened with some ceremony by Monsieur Bellamy, who insists that even a railway compartment may observe standards. Mr. Alden accepts a small piece and says it is less aggressive than the previous evening's example. This, too, is counted as progress. The pastry is saved until the train has passed a long stretch of open country under a clearing sky. Its glazed fruit has softened slightly, and the paper has become sticky at one corner, but it tastes of butter, sugar, and the bright tartness of preserved fruit. You eat it slowly, watching the French countryside move past in wide, level sections. Captain Harcourt, who claims not to care for sweets, accepts half when offered, and then gives a thoughtful silence that suggests approval. Monsieur Bellamy says that food eaten in motion should be judged kindly because it has traveled too. Mr. Alden looks as if this principle is too broad to be safe, but he does not challenge it. In the afternoon, the compartment grows drowsier. The morning's transfer through Paris has spent its energy, and the longer continental movement now replaces it. Your companions fall into their separate habits. Mr. Alden writes a few notes in a small book, recording times, stations, and expenses, with a neatness that may later become useful or may simply comfort him now. Monsieur Bellamy reads the newspaper until the motion of the train makes the columns blur, then folds it and closes his eyes. Captain Harcourt watches the sky and occasionally names the kind of weather he expects, as though the land journey were still a voyage. You look at the reflection in the glass and see the compartment layered faintly over France, faces, lamps not yet lit, fields, telegraph wires, and the pale mark of your own hand resting near the window strap. Toward evening, the talk turns to the route ahead. Paris is already behind, and the next concern is the long approach toward the Alpine line. Monsieur Bellamy explains the broad direction, speaking of railway junctions, mountain approaches, and the passage that has made Italy feel nearer to Northern Europe than it once did. Mr. Alden asks precise questions about connections, not because he doubts the route, but because precision is his way of respecting it. Captain Harcourt says that mountains and seas have this in common. Both allow humans to cross them only under certain conditions, and both leave travelers feeling modern and small at the same time. No one answers immediately. The thought is not gloomy, it is only accurate. A halt comes at a provincial station where dinner is not yet required, but hot drinks are welcome. You step briefly onto the platform, more to stretch than to eat, and the air has changed since Paris. It is cooler, cleaner, with a smell of damp earth beyond the smoke. A woman sells small rolls from a basket. A boy carries bottles of mineral water. The station master walks with his hands behind his back, pausing to speak with a guard near the luggage van. You buy coffee from a counter where the cups are thick and the saucers mismatched, and the heat of it moves through your fingers before the taste reaches your mouth. Travel is partly a series of cups held in unfamiliar places. When the train moves again, the light begins to lower. Fields darken at their edges. Villages grow warmer in their windows. The carriage lamps are prepared, then lit, and once more the compartment becomes a small room set inside a moving night. The provisions from Paris are mostly gone, leaving only paper, crumbs, pear stems, and a little cheese wrapped for later. Mr. Alden updates the day's expenses. Monsieur Bellamy says that by the time they reach the mountainward stations, even Mr. Alden may admit the usefulness of unplanned food. Captain Harcourt, who has eaten enough to be charitable, says nothing against either side. Paris has served its purpose without becoming a stay. That is the curious nature of transit through a great city. It can feed you, delay you, impress you, confuse you, and release you before you have any right to claim that you know it. Yet it leaves marks. The coffee remains in memory. So does the cab crossing, the bread shop, the station mirror, the porter's beard, the newspaper seller's call, the feeling of money changing value in your hand. These are not monuments, but they are the city as a traveler receives it. As the third day lowers into night, the railway turns your thoughts toward the south and east. The Alps are still ahead, not yet seen but already present in the talk of routes, gradients, tunnels, and cooler air. London is now several kinds of distance behind you. Water distance, language distance, meal distance, sleep distance. France stretches around the train in darkness, and the line continues toward the mountain gate where the journey will begin to rise. The carriage rocks softly beneath its lamps, carrying you from the transit of Paris toward the long approach of the Alpine night. Chapter 6. Toward the Alpine Gate. By the time the train has left the last broad brightness of the afternoon behind, the journey has entered a quieter part of France. The fields outside the window are no longer offered to you in clear lines and colors, but in long, dark shapes, with a pale road appearing for a moment beside the track and then slipping away, or a farmhouse lamp set far back from the railway like a small fixed star near the ground. The carriage lamps are lit, and their yellow reflection trembles faintly in the glass, laying your companions' faces over the country beyond them. Mr. Alden's notebook lies open on his knee. Monsieur Bellamy has folded the Paris newspaper into a neat square and placed it beside the remaining provisions. Captain Harcourt sits angled toward the window, not because there is much to see, but because old habits of watching the weather do not end when the sea is far behind. The air has changed since Paris. It comes into the carriage at stops with a cooler edge, carrying damp earth, smoke, and the mineral suggestion of higher country still ahead. At each small station, the train seems to pause inside a pocket of lamplight, and then the dark closes again as the wheels resume their measured work. A village appears in fragments. The signboard, the station master's cap, a stack of milk cans, a dog nosing near the luggage room, a woman crossing the platform with a basket under one arm. Then all of it is gone. You begin to understand that the railway does not show a country as a road does. It gives it in glimpses, each one framed, shortened, and taken away before the mind can settle fully inside it. Monsieur Bellamy, who has been awake behind closed eyes, opens them when the train slows at a larger junction. He reads the station name through the window, then sits forward as though the printed syllables have reminded him of supper. Mr. Alden consults the schedule and confirms that the halt is long enough to be useful, but not long enough to be trusted. Captain Harcourt takes this as a fair description of most opportunities. The day has thinned everyone's appetite into something patient and steady. Breakfast in Paris, fruit in the carriage, coffee at a provincial platform, the last of the cheese, the sweet pastry saved and divided. All of it has carried you through the hours, but the body now asks for something warmer, something served with a spoon, something that belongs to evening rather than transit. The station dining room stands just beyond the platform doors, modest in size and bright with lamps. Its floor is worn near the entrance where countless travelers have carried damp boots over the same boards, and the tables are set close enough for the waiters to move by turning sideways. A stove near the inner wall gives the room a heat that reaches the face before the hands. The smell is immediately comforting. Broth, bread, coffee, cooked potatoes, wet wool drying on chairbacks, and a faint sweetness from preserved fruit arranged in small dishes under glass. No one here appears to be dining for leisure. They are eating because the railway has granted them a measured interval, and the room has learned to serve within that mercy. A waiter with silver hair at the temples leads you to a table near the wall, where Mr. Alden can see both the clock and the platform door. This is now understood as one of his requirements, like air or clean linen. Monsieur Bellamy speaks with the waiter, asks 2 questions about what can be served quickly, and then settles the matter on behalf of everyone. Soup, potatoes, trout if it is ready, bread, cheese, coffee. Captain Harcourt hears the word trout and gives a small nod of approval, not because fish inland can rival fish near a harbor, but because any place that can offer trout at a railway halt has made proper use of its geography. The soup arrives first, clear and hot, with vegetables cut small and herbs floating near the surface. You take it slowly, though the clock does not encourage slowness. The heat of it moves through the chest and seems to restore order after the long motion of the train. Bread follows in a basket, rougher than the Paris rolls but good, with a crust that breaks unevenly and an inside still soft enough to gather broth from the bowl. The potatoes are served with salt and butter. The trout, when it comes, is simple and delicate, its skin browned lightly, its flesh lifting away beneath the fork with very little persuasion. It tastes of cold water and kitchen discipline. For a while, the table is almost silent. This silence is not awkward. It is the silence of people whose attention has been returned to the body. Monsieur Bellamy eats with visible satisfaction, pausing once to approve the fish in a phrase that makes the waiter's expression soften. Mr. Alden keeps his watch near his plate, but forgets to look at it for several minutes, which Captain Harcourt notices without comment. Outside the dining room windows, the platform remains active. A porter carrying a trunk on his shoulder, a guard speaking with a man in a heavy coat, a woman lifting a sleeping child from one bench to another, a dog curled near the stove of the station office. The journey continues even while you sit. After the fish, coffee is brought in thicker cups than the Paris café used, and with it comes a small dish of preserved plums. Their syrup is dark, and the fruit has the soft, concentrated taste of summer kept for colder evenings. Captain Harcourt takes one, studies it briefly, and says that preserved fruit has the moral advantage of patience. Monsieur Bellamy replies that this is perhaps the first time a plum has been praised for character. Mr. Alden, Having checked the time at last, allows that there remain 9 minutes. 9 minutes in a railway dining room can feel generous when the bill has already been requested. The older waiter brings the account folded under a small saucer, and Monsieur Bellamy pays with coins counted swiftly but not carelessly. The waiter gives directions for the onward platform, though none are asked, because good railway servants know that travelers always require more guidance than their pride admits. You rise from the table with the pleasant heaviness of food taken just in time. Captain Harcourt secures a heel of bread and a small paper of salt. Mr. Alden retrieves his watch, notebook, and dignity in one smooth sequence. When the platform door opens, the cold comes in at once, and the dining room's warmth becomes a memory before the train has even begun to move. Back inside the carriage, the compartment receives you like a room that has waited without judgment. The lamps burn steadily. The leather straps hang in their old places. The provisions are rearranged, coats loosened, hats set aside. Outside, the junction slips away, and the line begins again through the night. The supper has changed the mood of the party. Mr. Alden writes the cost into his notebook, then adds, after a moment, the word trout, as though the meal deserves a record beyond arithmetic. Monsieur Bellamy notices and says nothing, which is generous. Captain Harcourt leans back and closes his eyes, holding the last warmth of the dining room somewhere behind his face. For the next hour, the train runs through country that gives few details but many suggestions. The ground seems to rise in long, invisible gestures. Rivers are crossed in darkness, announced by a hollow sound beneath the wheels and the momentary chill that comes through the seams of the carriage. At small stations, the roofs are steeper, the air clearer, and the people on the platforms more heavily wrapped. Telegraph wires follow and vanish, their lines barely visible against the night when a lamp catches them at an angle. You see the shape of a hill once, not clearly, but as a deeper dark behind the village lights. The mountains have not appeared. They have begun to make themselves felt. Monsieur Bellamy takes out a folded route map purchased in Paris and opens it carefully across his knees. Mr. Alden leans forward at once, unable to resist paper that promises order. The map is not large, and the light is not perfect, so the three of you must incline toward it while the carriage rocks. A finger traces the line already traveled: London, coast, crossing, French port, Paris, then the southward and eastward movement that has carried the day into night. Ahead, the line approaches the Alpine passage with its tunnels, gradients, border arrangements, and the celebrated works that have made the old difficulty of the mountains into a railway problem. Captain Harcourt opens one eye and says that a map always makes hard things look courteous. The remark stays with you as the map is folded away. On paper, the mountains are a line and a name. In practice, they are cold air entering at stations, changes of engine, men with lanterns checking couplings, heavier coats drawn from luggage, kitchens serving broth instead of delicate pastry, and passengers becoming aware that the earth itself has risen into the journey. Soft historical realism lives in these small proofs. The age has made enormous claims for steam and engineering, and much of the world has agreed to believe them. Yet the traveler still knows a mountain route through the fingers first, the need for gloves, the chill of metal, the stiffness of boots after a platform halt. At one stop, later than any comfortable hour, a railway employee walks along the carriages with a lantern and speaks briefly to the guard. There is a change in the train's handling, a delay not long enough to trouble anyone, but long enough to wake those who have drifted. Mr. Alden sits up at once. Monsieur Bellamy listens to the exchange outside and explains that they are waiting for a signal ahead, perhaps for traffic along the line, perhaps for some small adjustment of order that matters only because every train must make room for other trains. Captain Harcourt accepts this easily. Ships wait for tides, he says. Trains wait for permission. The modern world, for all its speed, is still full of waiting. The delay gives you time to step down for a moment, wrapped in your coat, onto a platform whose lamps are few and whose air is cold enough to clear the last drowsiness from your face. Beyond the station buildings, the land rises in dark masses. No view opens. There is no moonlit panorama, no theatrical revelation. There is only the certainty of height nearby. A man in a heavy jacket pushes a barrow stacked with mail bags. Another stands near a stove, visible through an office window, warming his hands over a mug. Somewhere close, water runs in a channel or stream, its sound thin and quick beneath the railway noises. You draw the air in slowly and taste smoke, stone, and cold. Near the platform counter, a woman sells coffee, rolls, and small paper twists of roasted chestnuts to passengers who have left their compartments for warmth and wakefulness. Monsieur Bellamy buys chestnuts almost at once, saying that no mountain approach should be made without acknowledging the season. The shells are dark and split, the insides hot enough to require patience. You hold one between your fingers until it can be peeled, then eat it carefully, finding it sweet, earthy, and soft. Mr. Alden accepts two and places one in his pocket for later, then seems mildly surprised by his own behavior. Captain Harcourt says that chestnuts are among the few foods improved by being difficult. The signal clears. Passengers return to their compartments, bringing in cold air, coffee steam, and the smell of roasted shells. The train begins again, at first slowly, then with renewed steadiness. Inside the carriage, the chestnuts are passed around, and conversation remains low, as though the lateness of the hour has made everyone unwilling to disturb the country outside. Monsieur Bellamy speaks of winter journeys he knew as a boy, when stations seemed to him like little islands of lamplight. Mr. Alden mentions, almost reluctantly, a childhood trip to the coast in weather so bad his mother declared the whole family had been personally insulted by the wind. Captain Harcourt smiles without opening his eyes. Such moments make the companions feel less like arrangements of the journey and more like people the journey has begun to reveal. Not central figures, not heroes, not characters around whom events must turn, but presences shaped by habit, memory, appetite, and usefulness. Travel does this gently when it is long enough. It allows a person's nature to appear in repeated acts, who checks the tickets, who orders food, who notices weather, who saves bread, who remembers fruit, who speaks when language fails. You are not carried by the railway alone. You are carried by these small reliabilities. Past midnight, The train enters a region of more frequent curves and altered sounds. The wheels speak differently against the rails. The engine's labor is felt through the carriage floor, not strained, but more present. Tunnels begin to interrupt the night, brief at first. A sudden enclosure, the window turning black, the sound pressing closer, then release into open darkness again. In those moments, the lamps inside the carriage seem brighter, and every face becomes more clearly its own reflection. Monsieur Bellamy lowers the map from the rack, then thinks better of it and leaves it untouched. There will be time enough for geography when morning gives it shape. Sleep comes unevenly. Mr. Alden dozes with his chin lowered and one hand still resting near his pocket. Monsieur Bellamy leans back beneath his hat, his breathing slow and regular. Captain Harcourt appears asleep, though once, when the train whistles near a cutting, he says without opening his eyes that the air has changed again. You sit by the window, wrapped in the carriage's dim warmth, feeling the movement as both tiring and comforting. The day has passed through Paris. Food, fields, coffee, maps, chestnuts, and rising land. Now the night carries what remains. Toward the hour when night is at its deepest, another station appears, smaller and colder than the last. The train slows, but does not fully empty. A few railway men move along the platform, their lanterns low. Somewhere ahead, engines are being prepared, checked, or changed. The sounds are metallic, deliberate, and softened by distance. You see a sign whose letters are hard to read through the glass, then a wall of stone behind it, then the sloping roof of a building designed for weather stronger than the soft rain of London. The journey has come near the Alpine gate. It will not cross in this chapter of the night, but it has reached the place where the crossing begins to matter. When the train moves on, the compartment settles again. The chestnut shells are folded into paper. The route map rests in the rack. The last of the coffee has cooled. Outside, the land lifts invisibly around the rails, and the darkness holds the mountains in reserve. You lean back as the carriage carries you onward, away from the long transit of Paris, and toward the engineered passage that will take the journey through stone, cold air, and morning. By the time the next day opens, the Alps will no longer be an idea on a map. They will be around you. Chapter 7. Through Mont Cenis. Morning comes into the carriage as a pale pressure against the window before it becomes light enough to show the world. You wake by degrees, not from a single sleep, but from a chain of small absences. A few minutes after one station, a longer drift between two tunnels, a half-dream in which the sound of the wheels has become rain on a roof, then the sharper return of the carriage lamp, the wool of your coat, the stiffness in your shoulders, and the knowledge that the train has carried you upward while you slept. Across from you, Mr. Alden is already awake, though the neatness of his collar has suffered from the night. Monsieur Bellamy opens his eyes slowly, as if he would prefer to negotiate with the morning in French before accepting it in any language. Captain Harcourt is looking out of the window, and this, more than the light itself, tells you that the mountains have arrived. They do not arrive as a single splendid view. At first, they are only a dark steepness beyond the station lamps, a slope rising too close to be part of the ordinary countryside. Then, as the train moves, The land opens in sections: stone walls, narrow valleys, roofs built for weather, water running white and quick beside the line, and higher forms half veiled by cloud. The air that enters at the next stop is cold enough to make everyone sit straighter. It carries smoke, iron, wet stone, and something clean beneath them all, as if the night's coal and carriage dust have met a country too large to absorb them. You put on your gloves before stepping down. The station is built with mountain seriousness. Its walls are thick, its roof pitched sharply, its platform swept but already darkened by soot and damp. Railway workers move with quiet purpose, their coats heavier than those worn in the lowlands, their faces reddened by weather and early hours. A man with a lantern walks along the carriages, checking couplings and speaking to another worker near the engine. Farther ahead, there is activity around the locomotive, metal sounds made softer by mist, steam rising and folding back into the cold. Mr. Alden watches everything with the respect he gives to organized systems. Captain Harcourt, who usually reserves admiration for ships and the sea, says that men who persuade trains to climb mountains must be allowed a certain pride. Breakfast is taken at the station because the body has reached the hour when bread and coffee become less a preference than a requirement. The dining room is warmer than the platform, but it does not try to pretend the mountains are outside its concern. Coats remain on the backs of chairs, boots leave wet marks near the entrance, and a stove gives out a heat that gathers people toward it between courses. Coffee comes first, strong and dark, followed by bread, butter, bowls of hot milk, boiled eggs, and a broth for those who have already learned that mountain mornings reward warmth more than appetite. Monsieur Bellamy orders with a voice still roughened by sleep. Mr. Alden eats with careful speed. Captain Harcourt takes broth and bread, then asks whether there are potatoes, because the sea may be far away but common sense is not. Around you, other travelers are learning the same morning. A woman wraps a shawl around a child who refuses to wake fully. Two railwaymen eat standing near the counter, their cups held close between both hands. A merchant with a fur collar studies a list of goods and occasionally looks toward the platform as if his cargo might develop opinions in his absence. The room's windows are fogged at the edges, and through the clearer center panes, you can see men moving beside the train in little bursts of purposeful motion. Breakfast in such a place is not leisurely, but it is restorative. The bread is coarse and good. The butter is firm from the cold. The broth has a plain, salty comfort that seems to belong exactly where it is. When the bell calls passengers back, the room empties with almost military gentleness. Chairs are pushed in, cups set down, napkins folded or abandoned, bills paid, and conversations cut cleanly in half. You return to the carriage carrying the warmth of coffee in your hands and the sharper cold of the platform on your face. The train waits under a cover of steam. Beyond it, the valley narrows, and the line ahead seems to disappear into stone, cloud, and engineering. Monsieur Bellamy points toward the works that mark the route and speaks of Mont Cenis with a certain reverence, not the reverence given to a natural wonder alone, but to the strange Victorian confidence that decided mountains could be scheduled. The train begins again slowly, as if taking the measure of the climb. Houses pass close to the line, their shutters closed against the cold. smoke lifting from chimneys and flattening beneath low cloud. Then come retaining walls, cuttings, bridges, and short tunnels that interrupt the morning with sudden blackness. Each time the carriage enters one, the windows become mirrors, the sound tightens around you, and the lamps seem briefly necessary again. When the train emerges, the outside returns altered. A waterfall glimpsed through bare branches, a stone shed beside the track, a group of workers standing near a siding, a mule cart waiting at a crossing while the steam world passes in front of it. The contrast is everywhere. Old mountain roads still exist, curling along slopes where carts, animals, and walkers have taken the slow way for centuries. The railway does not erase them. It runs beside them, above them, under them, sometimes within sight, and sometimes hidden in tunnels that feel like a second geography laid inside the first. Mr. Alden traces the route on the folded map, then gives up when the tunnels make the paper seem too calm for the reality. Captain Harcourt says that maps are drawn by people seated at tables and should be forgiven for their manners. Monsieur Bellamy smiles at this, then names the next section of the line as the train turns toward deeper stone. The great tunnel works change the nature of the journey. There is no theatrical announcement, no single moment when the world declares itself transformed. Instead, the train enters darkness and remains there long enough for every passenger to become conscious of the fact. The sound grows close and continuous. The carriage air thickens with coal smoke despite the closed windows. Conversation lowers, then stops, not out of fear, but because the tunnel makes every ordinary word seem too large. The lamps tremble faintly. The straps by the windows sway. Somewhere forward, the engine works with a steady force felt through the floor rather than seen. Inside that long enclosed passage, modern travel becomes strangely intimate. You are no longer looking at the mountains. You are inside the solution made for them. Stone surrounds the train where open air should be, and the line beneath the wheels carries all of you through a darkness planned by engineers, dug by laborers, measured by surveyors, financed by governments and companies, and trusted now by passengers eating breakfast crumbs from their gloves. It is an impressive thought, but not a loud one. The greater achievement is felt in the ordinary behavior it permits. Mr. Alden checks his watch. Monsieur Bellamy adjusts his cuff. Captain Harcourt closes his eyes. The impossible has become a timetable. A child in the next compartment grows restless in the tunnel, and a woman's low voice begins to soothe him. No words are distinct, only the rhythm of reassurance. A gentleman coughs, then apologizes to no one in particular. One of the carriage lamps flutters, steadies, and continues. You notice the smell of wool, leather, metal, and faint smoke caught in the enclosed air. Time feels less exact here. The train might have been under the mountain for minutes or for an hour. Mr. Alden's watch could settle the matter, but for once no one asks him to consult it. When daylight returns, it does so with a softness that seems almost surprising. The train emerges into a mountain world, changed by the crossing. The air beyond the glass appears brighter, colder, and more spacious. Snow lies in high pockets where the sun has not reached with strength. Lower down, stone walls divide small fields, and roofs cluster around church towers or station buildings in villages built close to the ground. Passengers stir. Someone laughs quietly, less from amusement than release. Monsieur Bellamy draws in a breath and says that Italy will not be far now in spirit, even if rails and officials still require their stages. Mr. Alden, restored by daylight, asks exactly how many stages. The border procedures come not as drama, but as repetition with different uniforms. At a station where the air cuts cleanly through the coat, papers are examined, luggage questions are asked, and the party becomes once again a collection of names, destinations, bags, and intentions. The officials are not unkind. They are simply placed between territories, and such men often learn to treat impatience as weather. Monsieur Bellamy helps with phrases where needed. Mr. Alden produces documents so promptly that one clerk raises his eyebrows in approval. Captain Harcourt's sea bag attracts a glance, perhaps because it looks as if it has crossed more borders than some passengers. The hat box is opened, inspected, and closed with its dignity partly intact. There is a brief chance to eat again while the formalities are completed. Not a meal in full, but a mountain station offering that has the virtue of being hot. Bowls of broth are available, along with potatoes, bread, a little cheese, and coffee poured from a pot that has clearly served many travelers before you. You stand rather than sit, because sitting would imply too much confidence in the length of the halt. The broth is darker than the morning's, with a taste of meat, salt, and herbs. The potato is floury and warm enough to steam when broken. Monsieur Bellamy finds preserved fruit, apricots or plums held in syrup, and insists that something sweet is necessary after official scrutiny. Mr. Alden agrees before remembering to be surprised by himself. On the platform, a group of railway workers take their own food near a wall out of the wind. One has bread and cheese wrapped in cloth, another drinks from a tin cup, a third smokes with his collar turned high and says almost nothing. Their presence gives the route its proper weight. For passengers, the crossing is a story. For them, it is employment, weather, maintenance, tools, signals, and the daily handling of a difficult line. You watch one of them tap the wheel of a carriage with a hammer, pause for the sound, then move to the next. The act is brief and exact, a small ritual of safety that most passengers never notice. Late-Victorian confidence rests on thousands of such unnoticed gestures. The descent begins with a change in feeling before a change in view. The train seems to run more freely, though still under discipline, and the curves reveal wider glimpses of valley and sky. Clouds tear open in places, showing slopes, villages, roads, and distant ridges layered in blue-gray distance. The cold remains, but there are hints of another climate waiting below, a softer brightness, a different angle of sun, a thinning of the northern damp. Captain Harcourt says that he can smell the south, which Mr. Alden receives with polite doubt. Monsieur Bellamy says that sailors are entitled to such claims, since they spend half their lives smelling weather before seeing land. As the hours pass, the mountain food, the tunnel air, the border stamps, and the changing light begin to gather into one continuous sensation of crossing. You are not merely moving from France toward Italy. You are passing through the old physical argument of Europe, where mountains once slowed armies, merchants, pilgrims, letters, marriages, and news. The railway has shortened the argument, but has not made it meaningless. Your body still knows the ascent through stiffness, the cold through your fingers, the tunnel through your breathing, the descent through the easier roll of the carriage. A timetable can compress all this into a line. The traveler receives it as a sequence of textures. At a later halt, the station signs and voices make the change clearer. Italian words begin to appear with greater confidence. The gestures of porters alter. The rhythm of announcements shifts. Even the way people stand near the train seems a little different, though such impressions are hard to defend and easy to feel. A vendor approaches the carriage with oranges, small loaves, and something wrapped in paper that Monsieur Bellamy identifies after a short exchange. There is coffee again, stronger and darker, served quickly through the window to those who can manage cup, coin, and balance all at once. You buy oranges because the bright fruit seems to belong to the light that is beginning to find its way into the valley. Mr. Alden updates the records in his notebook. London to the coast, coast to France, Paris transit, southward line, mountain approach, Mont Cenis passage. His neat writing makes the journey appear more orderly than it has felt, but not false. Order is one layer of the experience. Beneath it lie the half-finished cups, the lost glove at supper, the child in the tunnel, the border clerk's eyebrow, the smell of broth, the cold platform, the taste of orange after smoke. Captain Harcourt watches him write and says that a logbook is never the voyage, but it helps a man believe the voyage has not escaped him. Mr. Alden looks pleased by this and writes the date more carefully. Afternoon leans toward evening as the train continues down from the higher country. The last of the Alpine cold remains in the folds of coats and in the memory of your hands, but outside the window the world has begun to loosen. Stone gives way gradually to warmer tones. Roofs change. Fields appear in different shapes. At one station, a boy runs along the platform selling little cakes dusted with sugar, and Monsieur Bellamy buys enough for the compartment because no one should enter Italy in a state of unnecessary severity. The cakes are dry, sweet, and faintly flavored with almond. Captain Harcourt eats two with the innocence of a man who has forgotten claiming indifference to sweets. The companions are quieter after the crossing, but it is the quiet of completion rather than fatigue alone. Something has been achieved without hurry and without spectacle. The train has entered stone and returned to light. The officials have examined the papers and allowed the journey onward. Food has been taken where warmth could be found. The luggage, against reasonable expectation, appears still to belong to the same party. You sit with the orange peel folded in a scrap of paper, the taste of almond cake lingering, and the Alps slowly receding behind the line. By evening, the mountains are no longer around you in the same way. They remain visible in memory and, at times, through the window, but the train is carrying you into the first real approach of Italy. The air that enters at halts is less severe. Voices on platforms have changed their music. A station lamp shines on a basket of citrus, a stack of bread, a porter's blue jacket, and the side of your carriage darkened by the long road through smoke and tunnel. You think of London's wet morning, the Channel's gray water, Paris coffee, the mountain broth, and the darkness under Mont Cenis, all held now inside the fourth day. Ahead, Italy opens southward, and the next stage of the journey waits in warmer air, new food, and another language rising from the platform. Chapter 8. Italy opens southward. Italy enters first through the voices on the platform. The land itself has been changing for some time, softening after the Alpine passage, loosening from stone and cold into warmer slopes, lower stations, and windows where the light seems to rest differently on plaster walls and tiled roofs. But it is the sound of speech that makes the crossing feel complete. Porters call to one another in quick, rounded phrases. A railway guard lifts his hand and answers a question with emotion as fluid as the words themselves. Somewhere beyond the carriage, a woman laughs at something said while luggage is being lowered from a rack. The train has brought you through tunnels, border papers, broth, coffee, and cold platforms, and now the evening gathers around a country whose first welcome is not formal. It is human noise. You sit near the window with your gloves loosened and the last mountain chill still hidden inside your sleeves. Outside, the station wall is painted a pale color that holds the day's remaining warmth. A row of lamps has been lit under the platform roof, but the sky beyond them is not yet dark, and the mingling of evening and artificial light makes everything appear briefly suspended. The blue jacket of a porter, the brass handle of a carriage door, the oranges piled in a basket, the white cloth over a vendor's tray, the smoke from the engine drifting above it all. Mr. Alden has opened the timetable again, though less urgently than before. Monsieur Bellamy is listening more than reading, allowing the language around him to settle into place. Captain Harcourt looks toward the far end of the station and says that the air has become kinder. A vendor approaches the carriage with a basket looped over one arm. There are oranges, small rolls, paper twists of sugared nuts, and a few hard little cakes whose surface has cracked in the oven. Monsieur Bellamy speaks with him, then laughs softly at the speed of the reply. You buy oranges first because their color seems to belong to the evening, and then the cakes because travel has already taught you that small food bought through a window may become important later. The vendor counts the coins carefully, gives back change with a nod, and moves along to the next compartment, where a child presses close to the glass with such longing that the mother buys twice as much as she meant to. The oranges are passed from hand to hand. Their peel comes away more easily than the fruit bought on the English coast, and the scent is brighter, almost floral, cutting through the carriage's older layers of smoke, wool, leather, and metal. Captain Harcourt eats his slowly, one section at a time, as if the fruit confirms his private theory that the South has arrived. Mr. Alden places half of his in a handkerchief for later and then changes his mind, finishing it with an expression that suggests common sense has yielded to appetite. Monsieur Bellamy says that borders should always be marked by fruit, not flags, because fruit gives more useful information. No one improves the remark, so it remains as it is. The train moves again before full dark. At first, the country outside is still close to the mountains, with ridges showing in the distance and valleys folding into shadow. Then the line draws onward into a gentler world of towns, fields, and roads, where people seem to use the evening differently. At one level crossing, a man with a cart waits beside a pair of animals, his hat pushed back, his face turned toward the passing train without surprise. At another, children stand near a wall and raise their hands, not in farewell to anyone particular, but in greeting to movement itself. The carriage rocks with the same railway rhythm as before, yet the world beyond the glass has altered the meaning of the sound. By the time the next substantial halt comes, the lamps are stronger, and the appetite of the compartment has returned with the accuracy of a well-kept clock. The station is busier than the last, with more travelers on the platform and a dining room visible through tall windows. Its tables are already occupied by people eating with a mixture of haste and pleasure that feels different from the French railway supper. There is more gesture in the room, more visible conversation, more leaning across plates to ask, answer, recommend, object, and laugh. The waiters move quickly but not silently. Their hands speak with them. Monsieur Bellamy watches for a moment and says that the evening will require flexibility. Mr. Alden asks whether flexibility has been printed in the schedule. Captain Harcourt says it rarely has, though it is often necessary. You enter with your companions and are met by warmth, steam, coffee, oil, garlic, bread, and the deeper smell of fish or broth being carried from the kitchen. The room is not large, but it feels abundant. A counter near one wall displays loaves, a dish of olives, a round cheese under cloth, oranges, little pastries, and bottles with handwritten labels. At the tables, travelers sit close together, a priest with a worn valise, two women in dark dresses sharing soup, a railway employee eating pasta with astonishing speed, a family whose children have been given bread to keep them patient. Your party is shown to a table near the side, and once more Mr. Alden arranges himself where the clock and door can be seen. This habit has become so complete that no one comments on it. The first dish is pasta in a simple sauce, brought in shallow bowls and sprinkled with grated cheese. It is not heavy, not elaborate, but after the mountain day it has the comfort of warmth joined to softness. You lift the fork and learn at once that eating unfamiliar food under time pressure requires a humility not mentioned in travel guides. Monsieur Bellamy manages well. Captain Harcourt manages by refusing to be embarrassed. Mr. Alden studies the matter for several seconds, then proceeds with the same discipline he applies to timetables. The sauce tastes of tomato, oil, and a little herb, and the cheese clings to it in small salty threads. Bread follows, and then olives, dark and green together, their flavor sharper than the English table would usually permit, before admitting that it is pleased. A plate of fish comes next, small and simply cooked, with lemon squeezed over it at the table by the waiter, who performs the act as if no fish should be trusted to travel without brightness. There are potatoes dressed with oil, more bread, and a jug of local wine that Mr. Alden approaches with caution before finding it mild enough for respect. Captain Harcourt eats with particular satisfaction. Sea fish inland, he says, should always be judged with mercy, but this one asks for very little. Monsieur Bellamy speaks to the waiter about the route south, and the waiter, delighted to be useful, names towns and connections while pointing with two fingers as if drawing the railway across the tablecloth. This is how Italy begins to enter the journey, through food, advice, and the easy authority of people whose country you are crossing. The waiter explains that the train south will continue through the night and into the next day's warmth, and that Brindisi is still not close, though it is already present in the direction of everything. Ships, he says, make passengers impatient before they have even seen the sea. Monsieur Bellamy translates for Mr. Alden, softening nothing except the speed. Mr. Alden asks one precise question about the onward connection, which the waiter answers by bringing another man from the counter who knows the railway better. The second man gives an answer longer than necessary, with confidence great enough to make the excess reassuring. Captain Harcourt listens, then says that if all railway information were served with pasta, travelers would quarrel less with fate. Coffee arrives after the plates are cleared, small and dark, taken standing by some travelers and seated by those who trust the remaining minutes. It is stronger than the coffee of Paris, or perhaps it only feels that way because the day has grown longer. Beside it comes a little pastry, crisp at the edges, filled with something sweetened and faintly scented with citrus. You eat it slowly despite the station clock, because the flavor seems to gather the evening into a single mouthful. Almond, sugar, orange peel, warm pastry, and the smoke of the lamps overhead. Mr. Alden checks the time, then takes one pastry for himself and one wrapped for later. He has become, without admitting it, a man who prepares for uncertainty through dessert. At the counter, your companions gather additional food for the onward journey. Bread, a little cheese, oranges, a packet of nuts, and a twist of salt are bought and wrapped. The practical English companion now permits these purchases with less argument than in Paris. Soft realism has its own persuasion. Hunger returns. Stations are not always generous, and a traveler who has crossed mountains learns to respect anything that fits in paper and survives a carriage. The waiter adds 2 small cakes to the parcel and says something that makes Monsieur Bellamy smile. When asked, he explains that the cakes are for courage. Captain Harcourt says courage is welcome in any form that can be eaten. Back on the platform, the night has settled fully, but the air does not bite as it did near the Alpine stations. It touches the face more softly and carries the smell of lamps, oil, food, and distant damp stone. A porter helps secure the luggage, lifting the trunk with a grunt that sounds less like complaint than punctuation. The hat box is placed with unusual tenderness after Monsieur Bellamy gives instructions whose elegance is probably wasted on a hat box, but not on the porter. A woman nearby argues cheerfully with a railway man over the placement of a basket containing live chickens. The railway man refuses, relents, refuses again, and finally reaches an arrangement that satisfies law, poultry, and public order as far as any one arrangement can. You climb back into the carriage carrying the station meal with you in several forms: warmth in the body, coffee on the tongue, orange scent on the fingers, and paper-wrapped provisions tucked near the corner. The compartment has gathered the marks of the journey. There are crumbs from France, chestnut shells folded into yesterday's paper, a smudge of soot near the window strap, and a faint scratch on Mr. Alden's luggage case from some unknown transfer. No one is as neat as when London released you. This is not neglect. It is evidence. Travel has begun to write itself on clothes, cases, habits, and appetite. As the train leaves the station, the dining room windows pass slowly beside you. Inside, the waiters are already clearing plates and setting tables for another set of passengers. The man who explained the railway route is speaking to someone else now, using the same two fingers to draw another path across the air. The family with the children remains at its table, the youngest nearly asleep over a piece of bread. Then the platform ends, the lamps fall behind, and the train enters the night with its renewed company of fed, tired, southbound travelers. For a while, your companions are quiet. This quiet has changed from the silences of earlier days. On the English night train, silence came from unfamiliarity and fatigue. On the Channel steamer, it came from the body learning water. In the French dining room, it came because hunger had taken precedence over conversation. Here, after the first Italian supper, it comes from ease. The group has learned one another's travel shapes. Mr. Alden checks the tickets because he is Mr. Alden. Monsieur Bellamy stores food because future comfort depends on present foresight. Captain Harcourt remarks on weather, vessels, and edible courage. You receive these habits now as part of the journey's furniture. The landscape outside is difficult to see, but it has not vanished entirely. At times the train passes near a town, and the windows show lit balconies, pale walls, shutters, a church front, or a street where a few figures move beneath lamps. Elsewhere, there is only darkness and the occasional reflection of your own compartment layered over it. The railway line bends and continues, drawing you farther from the Alpine crossing and deeper into the long southward descent of the Italian peninsula. Brindisi is not yet near enough to smell the harbor, but it has become the word behind the next decisions. The steamer waits somewhere beyond all this land, still invisible, already shaping the timetable. Monsieur Bellamy opens the wrapped parcel and checks its contents with the satisfaction of a quartermaster. Oranges, bread, cheese, nuts, cakes for courage. Mr. Alden writes the purchases into his notebook, hesitates, and leaves the cakes unrecorded. Captain Harcourt notices and says nothing. Some forms of accounting are better left incomplete. The train rocks on, and the night deepens around the carriage while the compartment lamp holds its small circle of order. Near midnight, there is a halt at a smaller station where few passengers descend. You step onto the platform briefly, more to feel the air than from need. A single lamp burns near a bench. Two railway men speak beside the office door. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once and then thinks better of continuing. The station sign is painted in dark letters on a pale board, and the name, unfamiliar but musical, seems to belong entirely to the country you have entered. Mr. Alden remains in the carriage. Monsieur Bellamy steps down long enough to ask a question of the guard. Captain Harcourt looks up at the sky and says the clouds have thinned. When the train moves again, you feel sleep approaching in the ordinary way of railway sleep, not as surrender, but as a series of small permissions. You permit the timetable to belong to Mr. Alden for a while. You permit the luggage to remain wherever the railway has placed it. You permit the wrapped food to wait in the corner, the companions to settle into their own drowsiness, and the line to carry all of you southward without being watched at every mile. The day has taken you from mountain cold into Italian warmth, from broth to pasta, from tunnel darkness to citrus under station lamps. Each stage has changed the journey without breaking it. The carriage continues through the night, and Italy opens not in one view, but in many small acceptances: the taste of coffee, the softness of evening air, the waiter's swift hands, the porter's blue jacket, the station cakes wrapped for courage, the warmer sound of voices passing through the window before the train moves on. Ahead, the peninsula lengthens toward the Adriatic, toward wider daylight, toward the railway hours that will carry you down through towns, fields, meals, and stations until the sea returns at Brindisi. The first Italian evening settles behind you, and the south waits somewhere beyond the darkened glass. Chapter 9. Down the Italian Peninsula. Morning returns to the carriage in a warmer color than the mornings before it. The light does not enter with the gray caution of the English coast or the cold pressure of the Alpine stations, but with a mild golden persistence that finds the edges of luggage, the brass of the window latch, the folds of coats, and the paper parcels stored carefully in the corner. You wake to the sound of wheels running steadily beneath you, and to the knowledge that the train has been moving south, while sleep came and went in shallow layers. Across from you, Mr. Alden is still half asleep, his hand resting near the pocket where the papers remain. Monsieur Bellamy has his hat lowered over his eyes. Captain Harcourt is awake, of course, and looking out as if the land has been speaking to him before anyone else could hear it. Outside, Italy stretches in long morning fragments. Fields open and close beside the line. Villages appear with pale walls, tiled roofs, small stations, and laundry already stirring from balconies where the day has begun before the train's arrival. Here and there, cypresses stand in dark, upright groups near a road or a cemetery wall. At a crossing, a woman waits with a basket on her hip, while a child beside her waves at the carriages. Farther on, the land flattens for a while, then gathers into low hills again. The train gives you the country as it gives all countries, not as a full possession, but as a passing invitation. The first meal of the day is assembled before any station offers a proper one. Monsieur Bellamy wakes, remembers the provisions, and opens the parcel from the evening before with the care of a man unwrapping a small treaty with hunger. There is bread, a little firmer now but still good, cheese wrapped in paper, oranges, nuts, and the cakes that the waiter called courage. Mr. Alden opens his eyes fully when the bread appears, as if breakfast has made a more convincing argument than daylight. Captain Harcourt lends his pocket knife. You eat slowly, balancing bread and cheese on a folded napkin, while the train passes a sunlit wall covered in vines. The food is plain, but by the 5th day of travel, plain food shared in motion has become its own kind of ceremony. At the next station, coffee is bought through the carriage window. The vendor carries a tray with cups so small they seem almost decorative, but the coffee inside them is serious enough to clear the last of sleep from the mind. There are also rolls, hard-boiled eggs, and a basket of fruit, figs, oranges, and small pears with skins marked by handling. Monsieur Bellamy manages the purchases quickly. Mr. Alden manages the coins. Captain Harcourt manages to acquire more food than anyone asked for, and claims that the fault lies with the generosity of the country. You hold the cup carefully as the train begins to move again, taking the coffee in cautious sips while the platform slides away. The taste is dark, bitter, and useful. The morning settles into the pattern of a long railway day. There is no single great event at first, only the repetition that slowly becomes intimate, the compartment warming, the window opened and closed according to smoke and dust, a guard passing along the corridor, the distant call of station names, the rearrangement of legs, hats, coats, and parcels. A woman in the next compartment sings a few lines under her breath to a child, not loudly enough to be intrusive, but clearly enough for the melody to come and go with the motion of the train. Mr. Alden writes the time of each halt in his notebook. Monsieur Bellamy reads yesterday's paper as if news may improve with delay. Captain Harcourt looks out toward the east whenever the line bends, waiting for the first real suggestion of the sea. A long journey by rail makes the carriage into a household with wheels. Its members eat, doze, read, disagree mildly, lose small objects, find them again, and learn where each person prefers to sit. Mr. Alden keeps order, but his order has softened. He no longer objects when provisions are bought without an exact plan. Monsieur Bellamy's translations have expanded into negotiations over fruit, coffee, and the quality of bread. Captain Harcourt's sea knowledge, not yet needed, has begun to hover over the party like weather approaching from beyond the hills. You, meanwhile, have learned the quiet skill of the traveling body, how to rest without fully sleeping, how to wake before a halt, how to eat from a paper parcel without losing crumbs to the floor, how to feel the movement as a background condition rather than an interruption. Near midday, the train stops at a larger town where the platform is busy enough to promise food and complicated enough to require attention. The station roof throws striped shadows across the stone. Porters move quickly around piles of luggage, and a man with a tray of pastries calls out in a voice that seems to rise above the steam and return from the walls. There is a dining room, but the halt is uncertain. Mr. Alden hears one answer from a railway man, Monsieur Bellamy hears another from a waiter, and Captain Harcourt concludes that the safest course is to eat as if leaving soon and buy as if delayed. This is accepted as wisdom. You enter the station dining room and find it alive with the middle of the day. The tables are covered in white cloth, but the room has less formality than warmth. Waiters moving with plates of pasta, bowls of soup, sliced bread, fish, roasted vegetables, and bottles of wine. Travelers turning in their chairs to check the platform. Railway employees eating quickly near the counter. Sunlight lying across the floor where the door stands open. The smell is generous. Tomato, oil, garlic, broth, coffee, hot bread, and fruit. Your party is seated near the wall, again with Mr. Alden's clear view of the clock preserved by unspoken agreement. The meal comes in practical courses. First, a bowl of soup, light but hot, with rice and vegetables. Then pasta dressed with oil, cheese, and a sauce that tastes of tomatoes cooked long enough to lose their sharpness. A plate of fish follows for those who want it, and Captain Harcourt does, leaning toward it with the attention he gives to anything that has known water. There are olives, bread, a dish of greens softened with oil, and a small bowl of lemons set near the fish. You eat with the appetite of someone carried through several countries in too few days, and yet the meal does not feel hurried inside itself. The room is hurried. The waiters are hurried. The clock is hurried. The food remains calm. At the next table, A merchant speaks to a railway official about crates bound south, tapping his fingers on a folded paper as if numbers might become more cooperative under pressure. Near the door, two young men with paint on their cuffs share a plate of pasta and a newspaper, arguing in low voices over an article neither seems willing to surrender. A mother tears bread into pieces for a child too tired to eat neatly. These people belong to the town, the railway, or other journeys you will never know, but for the length of the meal they shape your own passage. Travel is crowded with people who disappear almost at once and yet make the road feel inhabited. The gentle difficulty of the day arrives over luggage, not a crisis, not a loss, but one of those small confusions by which travel reminds everyone that paper labels and human intentions do not always move at the same speed. A porter believes one of the smaller cases should be shifted to another van for a later connection. Mr. Alden disagrees with grave politeness. Monsieur Bellamy speaks to the station clerk, who speaks to the porter, who produces another man with a ledger, who finds that the case has been entered correctly but placed beside the wrong pile. Captain Harcourt stands near the luggage with his stick and the patience of a man who has seen cargo delayed by tides, clerks, rats, weather, and human pride. The case is restored. Mr. Alden's relief is visible only in the careful way he adjusts his cuffs afterward. The delay, useful in its way, leaves time to buy food from the station counters. A round loaf, more oranges, a wedge of cheese, figs wrapped in paper, a small packet of sweet biscuits, and roasted almonds are added to the traveling store. Monsieur Bellamy also buys a little flask of oil and a twist of salt, explaining that bread and tomatoes, if the day provides tomatoes, can become a civilized meal almost anywhere. Mr. Alden asks whether the day has promised tomatoes. Monsieur Bellamy says Italy has given enough signs that optimism is reasonable. Captain Harcourt says nothing, but he buys the tomatoes when a boy appears with a basket near the platform. Back in the carriage, the afternoon spreads long and warm. The country beyond the window changes gradually, with no need to announce itself. There are flatter stretches where fields run toward low horizons, then towns clustered around stations, then glimpses of distant water or sky so pale and open that everyone looks twice. The heat gathers inside the carriage until the window must be lowered, bringing in smoke, dust, warm air, and the living smell of the line. Telegraph poles move beside you in a steady procession. At one halt, a priest boards and rides for several stations, reading calmly from a small book. At another, a farmer places a basket under the seat and spends the journey keeping one foot against it, as if the basket contains either food or a secret. The shared food becomes an afternoon occupation. The tomatoes are cut with Captain Harcourt's knife and eaten with bread, oil, and salt from the paper twist. Their flesh is soft, bright, and warm from the day, and the juice soaks into the bread before it can be managed properly. Monsieur Bellamy declares this an argument in favor of unplanned purchases. Mr. Alden, who has tomato on his cuff, says that the argument is persuasive but untidy. You eat an orange afterward, then a fig, its seeds small and sweet against the tongue. Outside, Italy continues to pass in sunlit pieces, and the train carries the compartment's small meal through a landscape that seems to have provided it. The rhythm of the journey has become less about distance and more about intervals between nourishment, sleep, and official procedure. You no longer think only in cities. You think in platform coffee, in the texture of bread, in whether a halt will allow hot food, in the reliability of porters, in the tone of a clerk who has seen too many confused travelers, in the look of a dining room through a station window. This is how the 19th century route makes itself real, not through the grand sweep of the map alone, but through the body's repeated need to be fed, warmed, carried, counted, and occasionally reassured. Late in the afternoon, clouds gather lightly and then pass, leaving the sky clearer and the air softer. The train moves through a region where the houses are paler, the shutters darker, and the vegetation more open to the sun. At a small station, a boy sells pastries dusted with sugar from a tray covered in cloth. Monsieur Bellamy buys several before anyone asks, and the boy, seeing the foreign party, adds a torrent of cheerful explanation that no one fully needs. The pastries are crisp, filled with a faintly sweet cream, and impossible to eat without leaving sugar on the fingers. Captain Harcourt, who has repeatedly claimed moderation, takes a second and says the first was too small to judge. As evening approaches, Brindisi begins to enter the compartment as a word with weight. It is still ahead, but now not impossibly ahead. The steamer becomes more than an item on the route. It becomes the next world waiting beyond the railway. Captain Harcourt is asked what the harbor may be like, and he answers carefully, not pretending knowledge he does not possess. A southern port, he says, is often a mixture of patience and hurry. Cargo that has waited for days, passengers who cannot wait another hour, officials who know both conditions and serve neither completely. Mr. Alden asks whether steamers usually depart on time. Captain Harcourt says that they depart when the ship, the papers, the cargo, the weather, and the company's interests reach agreement. This answer does not comfort Mr. Alden, but it does educate him. The compartment grows companionable in the lowering light. Monsieur Bellamy speaks of Mediterranean ports he has known only through other people's stories. Mr. Alden reviews the documents required at Brindisi and discovers, with some satisfaction, that all remain in order. Captain Harcourt checks his sea bag, not because it needs checking, but because ships make him return to old disciplines. You look at your own valise and notice how much less strange it seems now than on the London curb. It has become familiar through handling, waiting, and survival. The scuff on one corner, the darkened strap, the label worn at the edge, all give it the look of an object that has earned its place in the journey. Dinner is not taken in a grand room this time, but in pieces across a late halt and the provisions already gathered. The station offers hot coffee, bread, a little cheese, and slices of cured meat. A vendor has roasted chickpeas in paper cones, and another sells fruit from a basket whose handle has been mended with string. You buy what can be carried and return to the carriage as the guard begins to urge passengers back. The food is eaten under the compartment lamp. Bread with oil, cheese, cured meat, roasted chickpeas, oranges, and the last of the sugared pastries. It is not a formal supper, but it is one of the most satisfying meals of the journey because it belongs wholly to movement. Night rises outside, and the window becomes a mirror again. The reflection shows tired faces, loosened collars, parcels reduced to crumbs and folded paper, and the lamp's steady glow. Beyond the reflection, station lights appear from time to time, each one briefly creating a world, a platform, a sign, a guard, a woman in black, a row of crates, a dog sleeping beneath a bench, a boy carrying water. Then the train moves on. The South is no longer an idea. It is the warm darkness through which the carriage runs. A mild uncertainty appears near the end of the evening when the train pauses longer than expected at a junction. Mr. Alden wakes from a doze almost immediately. Monsieur Bellamy steps down to inquire and returns with the explanation that a freight movement ahead has delayed the line for a short while. There is no danger and no real problem, only the ordinary negotiation of rail traffic. Captain Harcourt says that commerce has as much right to be inconvenient as passengers do. The delay lasts perhaps 20 minutes, long enough for people to lean from windows, speak across compartments, buy water from a vendor who appears as if summoned by delay itself, and wonder whether the steamer connection will remain comfortable. When the train begins again, the relief is gentle rather than dramatic. Mr. Alden calculates and recalculates, then decides that the margin remains acceptable. Monsieur Bellamy says that margins, like pastries, are best when not too thin. Captain Harcourt approves this comparison. You settle back into the seat, feeling the day's miles not as numbers, but as a long accumulation of taste and motion. Coffee at dawn, pasta at midday, tomatoes in the afternoon, chickpeas at night, the dry sweetness of pastries, the citrus scent that has followed the group since the mountains. Italy has been entering the journey through the mouth as much as through the window. Past midnight, conversation fades. The companions arrange themselves for another imperfect railway sleep. Mr. Alden's notebook is closed. Monsieur Bellamy's hat lowers over his eyes. Captain Harcourt keeps one hand near his sea bag, already half returned to the habits of shipboard life. You remain awake a little longer, listening to the sound of the train carrying you down the peninsula toward the Adriatic. The rails run through darkness, but ahead of them lies a harbor, and beyond the harbor a steamer whose decks, cabins, meals, and sea air will replace the compartment that has become so familiar. The fifth day has been a day of continuation rather than arrival, and for that reason it has entered deeply into the body. You have learned the long middle of travel, the eating, waiting, buying, sharing, checking, sleeping, waking, and moving that connect one great threshold to another. London feels far behind now, not only in miles but in manners, weather, bread, speech, and light. The Alps have become yesterday's cold. Paris has become coffee and mirrors. Italy has become warmth, fruit, stations, and the promise of the sea. Ahead, Brindisi waits in the night, and with it the harbor where the railway will finally release you to the steamer. Chapter 10: Brindisi Harbor. The train reaches Brindisi after the day has thinned into the deep hours of night, when most towns seem to belong more to lamps than to streets. For some time before arrival, you have felt the approach of the coast without seeing it clearly. The air entering at the last halts has carried a damp softness different from inland warmth, and Captain Harcourt, waking from a light doze, has twice looked toward the dark window with the expression of a man listening for water. Mr. Alden has been awake for the final hour, not because anything has gone wrong, but because arrival after midnight gives every schedule a more fragile look. Monsieur Bellamy sits with his hat in his hands, the paper-wrapped remains of the day's provisions beside him, his face calm and tired in the compartment lamp. Outside, the stations have grown fewer and stranger in the night. Their names appear briefly on pale boards, then vanish before the mind can place them. At one halt, a porter carried a lantern so close to the window that his face seemed to float for a moment in the glass. At another, a woman in black stood beside two baskets and a sleeping child, waiting for a train that was not yours. The long southward railway has gathered these fragments and left them behind one by one, until the compartment feels almost suspended between the Italian peninsula and the sea. Then the train begins to slow more steadily, passing through sidings, warehouses, and lines of dark wagons, and Captain Harcourt says very softly that the harbor is near. Brindisi does not announce itself with splendor at first. It arrives as work. There are lamps, rails, freight sheds, men moving between shadows, and the smell of coal mingled with salt water, rope, fish, damp stone, and fruit that has traveled in crates. The station platform is active despite the hour, because ports keep a different clock from inland towns. Passengers descend stiffly, blinking under the lamps. Porters call in Italian, and some words return from the walls with a tired brightness. Somewhere beyond the station buildings, a ship's bell sounds once, not loudly, but with enough distance in it to make everyone pause for half a breath. The railway has brought you as far as it can. The next element waits outside. You step down from the carriage and feel the platform under your feet with the gratitude that follows long sitting. Your knees remember the motion of the train and do not immediately trust stillness. Mr. Alden gathers the papers, counts the smaller bags, and looks toward the luggage van before anyone has asked him to. Monsieur Bellamy speaks to a porter whose blue jacket is faded at the elbows and whose cap sits at an angle that suggests long acquaintance with late arrivals. Captain Harcourt remains still for a moment, drawing in the harbor air as if confirming an old friend by scent. The porter listens, nods, repeats the name of the hotel and the shipping office, then takes charge of the larger trunk with the grave indifference of a man who has moved every possible shape of luggage in every possible mood of passenger. The luggage appears slowly, as luggage often does when tired travelers most desire certainty. Trunks emerge from the van and are set down under a roof darkened by years of smoke. Carpet bags, hat boxes, canvas-wrapped bundles, crates, and leather cases make a temporary city of possessions on the platform. Your valise is with you, but the larger pieces must be found, claimed, and persuaded into the next arrangement. The hat box is discovered near a family's pile of bedding rolls, looking innocent of any intention to wander. The brown paper parcel has survived the Italian peninsula with only one corner softened. Captain Harcourt's sea bag, scarred and weathered, seems to belong to Brindisi more naturally than the rest of you do. A small confusion arises over the shipping labels. The steamer office has marked certain pieces for morning handling, while the hotel porter believes all luggage should first be taken under roof for the night. Mr. Alden stiffens at the possibility of division. Monsieur Bellamy translates, negotiates, listens, translates again, and gradually separates the issue into its harmless parts. The trunks can be stored near the hotel and sent to the steamer office early. The valises remain with you. The papers must be shown at the shipping desk before breakfast. Captain Harcourt, hearing this, says that a ship not yet boarded is already making demands, which proves she is real. The remark steadies Mr. Alden more effectively than argument. The walk from station to lodging is short, but in the night it feels like an entrance into another kind of travel. Brindisi's streets near the harbor are not asleep. They are reduced, dimmed, and working quietly. Men pass carrying baskets. A cart moves slowly over stone. A dog lies beneath a doorway and lifts its head without getting up. Lamps burn outside a shipping office where a clerk still bends over a ledger, his sleeve dark with ink at the cuff. From a narrow eating house comes the smell of fish, oil, garlic, bread, and wine, and though the hour is late, the smell seems less like indulgence than necessity. People who arrive by train after midnight still belong to the body, and the body asks to be received. The hotel is modest, with a tiled entrance, a desk, a sleepy clerk, and a register whose pages hold names from many directions. Some guests have come south for ships. Some are merchants. Some are officials. Some are travelers continuing east, their roots folded inside pockets and leather cases. The clerk takes your party's names with a pen that scratches audibly in the quiet lobby. He gives the room arrangements, gestures toward the stairs, and then, after a brief exchange with Monsieur Bellamy, admits that a supper can still be arranged nearby if the party does not require elegance. Captain Harcourt says that elegance after a long train journey is rarely useful. Mr. Alden asks first about the luggage room, then about supper. This is considered progress. The late meal is served in a room close to the harbor, half dining place, half refuge for those whom the railway and the sea have delivered at inconvenient hours. There are only a few tables occupied. A pair of sailors eat silently near the door. A man in a travel-stained coat writes a letter beside an empty plate. A woman with a basket of folded cloth speaks to the proprietor in low tones while coffee is prepared behind the counter. Your table is near a window whose shutters stand partly open, letting in the smell of the harbor and the soft movement of night air. The room's lamps are smoky, but the tablecloth is clean, and after the railway this seems like a kindness almost formal enough to be ceremonial. Food arrives with the directness of a port kitchen. First bread, then olives, then a dish of pasta with oil, garlic, and a little tomato, served hot enough to make conversation pause. Fish follows, small and fresh, cooked simply and brought with lemon. There are potatoes, a plate of greens, a bowl of oranges, and a little jug of local wine. The meal is not elaborate, yet it feels complete because everything belongs to where you are. The fish tastes of the nearby water. The olives taste of the country you have crossed. The oranges hold the southern light even under midnight lamps. The bread, torn by hand and drawn through oil, becomes the quiet center of the table. Your companions eat as people eat when a stage of travel has ended and the next has not yet begun. Mr. Alden, released for the moment from active calculation, allows the meal to reach him slowly. Monsieur Bellamy speaks with the proprietor about ships, weather, and morning arrangements, but even he lets the conversation fall for long intervals. Captain Harcourt eats the fish with complete attention. After a time, he says that a port meal should never be judged by the standards of a city restaurant, because its duty is not refinement, but restoration. The proprietor, hearing only the tone and perhaps one or two words, looks pleased enough. Outside, the harbor continues in low fragments. Footsteps pass. A cartwheel grinds briefly over stone. Somewhere, men speak near the water, their voices carrying without sharpness. You cannot see the steamer clearly from where you sit, but you know she is there, or another vessel like her, waiting with cabins, funnels, cargo space, dining saloons, stewards, coal, ledgers, and the entire floating order of the next stage. The thought might have stirred excitement earlier in the journey. Tonight, it brings something quieter. The ship can wait until morning. For now, there is food, a chair, a table, companions, and the knowledge that the railway has emptied you at the edge of the sea. Coffee comes last, dark and small, with figs and a little sweet pastry that the proprietor sends out because he has decided, without saying so, that foreign travelers arriving late should not end with fish alone. The figs are soft, their seeds fine and faintly crisp. The pastry carries honey and citrus peel, sticking lightly to the fingers. Mr. Alden looks at it as if he is considering whether to record it, then leaves the notebook closed. Monsieur Bellamy notices and smiles into his coffee. Captain Harcourt says that some entries are best kept by memory, especially if they contain honey. You eat slowly, feeling the day's long descent through Italy settle into the sweetness. When the party returns to the hotel, the streets seem even quieter, though the port itself never fully sleeps. The luggage has been placed in a storeroom whose walls smell faintly of wood, dust, and rope. Mr. Alden insists on seeing it once more, and no one objects. The trunk is there. The hat box is there. The brown paper parcel, less handsome than when it began in London but still intact, is there. Captain Harcourt's sea bag rests near the door as if prepared to leave without notice. The clerk assures you that a boy will carry word to the shipping office early. Mr. Alden receives this assurance with the careful gratitude of a man who trusts people more comfortably after seeing where the luggage is kept. Your room is simple. A bed with clean linen, a washstand with a basin and jug, a chair, a small table, shutters, a lamp, and a hook for the coat. After 5 days of railway compartments, dining rooms, platforms, cabs, and ship passages, stillness feels almost unfamiliar. You set down the valise, unfasten the straps, and remove only what is needed. The act of opening luggage at night has become less about unpacking and more about proof. Proof that your belongings remain with you. Proof that the day has ended. Proof that the body may stop guarding itself for a few hours. The water in the basin is cool. When you wash your hands, the scent of coal, orange peel, metal, and travel dust loosens from your skin. Beyond the shutters, Brindisi rests and works at the same time. A faint glow hangs over the harbor. Somewhere a rope knocks softly against wood. A voice calls once, then receives an answer too distant to understand. The sounds are not enough to keep anyone awake by force. They are the sounds of a place continuing beyond the traveler's need to follow it. You sit for a moment before sleeping, and the first 5 days gather without needing to be counted. London's wet curb, the southbound carriage, the grey channel, French coffee, Paris in transit, mountain broth, the darkness under Mont Cenis, Italian oranges, tomato on bread, the long descent, Brindisi fish at midnight. A journey changes shape when it reaches water. The railway has lines, stations, visible direction. The sea has routes, but they are held differently in charts, funnels, weather, harbors, and the judgment of crews. Tonight you stand only at that edge. The next part has not begun, and so it does not ask anything yet. The companions are in their own rooms or nearby, settling themselves into the same brief permission to rest. Mr. Alden's papers are folded. Monsieur Bellamy's translations are no longer needed for the hour. Captain Harcourt, perhaps, has opened his window toward the harbor because old sea habits return when water is close. The first part of the journey has found its resting place. It began with a valise in a damp London morning and has come, by rail, boat, cab, dining room, tunnel, platform, and midnight supper, to an Italian harbor where the lamps shine on stone and water. Nothing has ended in the grand sense. The map continues. The steamer waits. Suez, Egypt, and the wider East remain ahead as names still folded into paper and possibility. But the body knows a smaller truth before the mind does. One stage has been completed. One line has carried you to its edge. Outside, the harbor keeps its low watch. The water moves against the quay in small, dark folds. Ropes hold, lamps burn, and the night air carries salt, coal, fish, cooling stone, and the last sweetness of citrus from the market stalls. The railway is behind you now, quiet somewhere beyond the hotel walls. The sea is ahead, breathing in the dark. Between them, for a few hours, there is only Brindisi, clean linen, folded tickets, and the soft rest of arrival. The journey is complete. Rest well.